All right, start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm your host, Ben, and this is a Week 8 review of the EPL. I had Jeremy on yesterday to ask him to talk a little bit about Brentford and the Man City and Arsenal game, and I enjoyed enjoyed those chats, but didn't really get into the review much. So what I'm going to do is kind of go over those three games that we went over yesterday, but do it a little quicker, and then kind of do a more of a long form review of the other games, which I do kind of every week. Um, and I do want to get started quickly because I probably am going to run a little long like I normally do. So I will start with the game I did yesterday with Man City and Arsenal. It is Gabriel Martinelli, or it might even be a Nathan Ake own goal. I didn't actually check. Uh, I mean, the leading off story was Jeremy was expecting it to be boring, and it kind of was. The thing that was interesting to me was Saliba was fit going in, Gabriel Jesus was fit, and Arsenal's Community Shield win. I thought was going to be a bigger story than it was leading up to it, and it really wasn't. I was a bit surprised about that. And Kevin De Bruyne's role in both league games last season, and I think we definitely saw his miss show up. And there's an interesting thing about these two clubs with the rivalry kind of brewing. Everyone knows about Arteta being a former manager under Pep during those Fun City times teams from like 2017, 2018, and there's Arsenal and City have had a couple players play leave Arsenal to go to Man City. Samir Nasri, Adebayo. I think Gail Clichy might have been another. And then it just feels like Arteta has also taken a couple players from Pep. Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko. And it's funny because last year I was kind of thinking they would maybe target someone like Cancelo, and it feels like maybe they did, but City did move on from Cancelo, and that actually I think would could maybe be a story in this game as well, because it seems Pep has changed from playing with actual fullbacks that can somewhat do something in the final third to playing with center defense first center backs, and it's made them harder to score on. Pep is it seems has become almost brainwashed, or I don't want to necessarily say that obsessed, I guess would maybe be the word, just eliminating transitions against him. And I am curious also if the way that they lost last week to Wolves, maybe that kind of played a role a little bit in how he set up here, and also how I guess how he set up in midfield, and also how he set up in the back line, and just in general how the game went. He wanted it to be cagey. It's almost like he set up to get maybe a 1-0 kind of win, maybe even get a draw. It didn't really feel like he set up to actually win the game, and that definitely played out as well. I mean, with Arsenal, the surprise storyline was Jorginho, and I mentioned it yesterday. This was a sneaky good decision by Arteta. It's not necessarily like Jorginho had a masterclass of a game, but you saw the way that Arsenal wanted to try to somewhat play from the back, and with someone like Raya coming in, it feels like that's kind of that's the reason why he's been picked to play over someone like Ramsdale. And it's funny because in the beginning that ended up kind of working against them because they were so confident in being able to play from the back that City almost actually got them to, to have a couple screw ups in the beginning, which I'll get to. But it felt like Arteta understood it would be better to play Jorginho in this kind of pivot role to have the ball a little bit more from a deeper position than Declan Rice. And it actually worked out also because playing Declan Rice higher up to be a little bit more of a presser, or to be someone to maybe mark someone like Bernardo Silva or mark someone higher ended up working out for them as well. And we saw no Saka. No Saka was kind of expected, but it was still, this was the official line. And then a note I had was Party and Martinelli were fit enough for the bench, and both ended up kind of showing up in the second half. And then with Man City, we did see something different. We saw Rico Lewis come in. We saw Bernardo Silva kind of play in that little deeper role, kind of the same thing that Arsenal did with Jorginho. So I guess Bernardo Silva was kind of perhaps Rodri in this instance, and Kovacic was the other midfielder. So they formed a midfield three, and it was almost a 4-3-3. And I was wondering if you could honestly could have done the same lineup, but just shifted Bernardo Silva maybe to the right, and actually have someone to hold with, or maybe instead of Foden, maybe this would have been a good game to actually play Jack Grealish, even though I don't always favor him. But he would have at least done a decent job to keep with on his side, at least when where he would have looked to receive the ball. He would have cut in once getting it. But Foden and Alvarez were not doing that, and this game really showed both teams did not stretch the pitch out, and that's the reason why it wasn't necessarily the most entertaining game. Why there were few chances between both teams is because of that. Both teams wanted to play through the center, and the center was super congested. There was no way to really stretch it out a little bit. Um, and so with the match timeline, I mean, the first thought I had was Declan Rice needs to bully Rico Lewis whenever he gets on the ball, because I was a little bit surprised about that, and I was wondering who is going to play on the wing for Man City, and it turned out to be no one. But it was a pretty poor start for Arsenal. I mean, Raya and Rice immediately give the ball away in back-to-back times, and it probably leads to City's best chance with Ake. It comes up a corner kick. I mean, Rice clears the ball off the line. This is actually going in. I think Raya has a mess up actually with his positioning on this. And, Ake just kind of sends the rebound over, and, I think if any other or and then after that, Ake gets a chance, and, he basically sends it over, and I think any other defender in this position, it probably is the first goal in the game, and, if, City get that early goal, this game is entirely different. That would have forced Arsenal to actually press City, and this probably would have actually been a comfortable game. So this was maybe the defining moment of the game, and it happened in the first, I don't know, 5 minutes. But it was interesting because a lot of the graphics in the beginning, they did have Man City kind of playing a different formation, and almost within the first few minutes, you could see no, it was going to specifically be a midfield three, and I was just wondering, because Arsenal were playing Trossard, one way you could have maybe really hurt this is because there was no one playing on the right, for City. Like, Alvarez was just kinda playing, in the half space. Foden was doing the same thing. I was just wondering Martinelli would destroy this because Martin I was like, I actually had a note about that, because you would have imagined Martinelli would have, his positioning would have been far more wide than what Trossard was offering, and that would have at least forced Kyle Walker to mark that, and that would have kind of, opened up a little of that gap, and we didn't necessarily see that, at least in the first half. We did see it in the second half. And then there's the Raya howler, or it's a nearly a howler. Alvarez does a really good job to pick it off, and the ball nearly deflects in. And this is a good example, though, of Arsenal's problem. So Arsenal are trying to play through City, pressing them, and Rice is trying to hide, in my opinion. And so he eventually shows for the ball, and he plays it to Zinchenko on the sideline. Rice is actually telling Zinchenko just boot it away, and Zinchenko instead drags the ball back and plays it to Gabriel under pressure. And then Gabriel sends a weak pass backwards to Raya, where Alvarez sprints, and he nearly gets Raya to kick this into his own net, and it's almost a very embarrassing goal. And something I should have asked Jeremy about yesterday was what his thought was seeing Raya actually starting now for Arsenal. It was one thing to see when they made that move, for Raya to kind of accept, maybe get a couple Champions League games, maybe just kinda being a backup, maybe playing in the cup games, but for him to actually become their number 1, I should have actually asked Jeremy about that, because I feel like I could guess what his feelings were, but it would have been good to actually, hear those thoughts, and, so it almost really, backfired here, and then, we get to the Kovacic challenge. One thing I didn't really say yesterday is I thought this was more of a red than Curtis Jones the week before because he catches Odegaard from behind. It's high into the ankle or calf, and then so that was just a little bit of a surprise. Another thing too that's worth saying is for the Curtis Jones red, versus Tottenham, I don't necessarily need to harp on this a lot, but it was originally called a yellow, and then VAR made him change his mind. Or VAR went, no, you need to, you have a second look at this, and that's when they went to the screen, and that's when they froze the image. So it was very weird to hear the explanation afterwards, where they said, had it been called red, they wouldn't have changed the ref's mind, but they didn't want to actually, change what Michael Oliver thought in real time. And I was like, well, they did for the Liverpool game, and then you hear within I don't know 5 minutes later, Kovacic goes around again and he catches Rice, and this is a second yellow for sure because it's also late. And again, they had no issues sending Diego Jota off, the week before, and I was I was pretty fuming watching this, but and Jamie kind of mentioned it yesterday, and I think he was spot on. Where it almost felt like he was tired of the setup. He was tired of the way that the game was going, and he wanted to just kind of take a chance. And if he gets this right, Man City probably have a 3v2, and it's close to actually getting coming off, and it's close to being a really genius play. But the line between genius and insane, I guess, can be can be split. But here he is late, and it should have been a sent off, and the City got lucky here. And then we have maybe the best chance with Gvardiol to Holland, at least the best open play sequence I think of the first half, or maybe the game. So Kovacic gets around Odegaard and floats a ball to Holland. Holland, it's like the one time when Kovacic again kind of recognizes, hey, I need to kind of do something here. Uh, and he plays a risky ball to Holland. Holland, because Saliba has him really marking tight on the backside. Holland collects the ball and gets it to Rico Lewis, and then Lewis finds Phil Foden, and then Foden has a lovely turn to go upfield, and then he plays in Gavardiol making a run to go past him. Also, it's a run that Jesus this time didn't recognize. So if Gavardiol gets the ball in the wing, he's completely wide open, and he sends in a decent cross. He's looking for Holland, and if not for a really good, I think it's a header, late header by Gabriel. This maybe Holland maybe has a chance to get onto this, but that was pretty much the only creation they had in the first half. It was a very cagey game. Neither team had wingers to keep the pitch right. I keep harping on that, but both teams are also missing key players. I think that showed up as well. I mean, a thought I had was at halftime was it's probably going to be a game decided on a set piece or maybe a mistake, not necessarily something clever in open play. I was actually wrong about that because the goal Arsenal scored was pretty clever. I was also wondering when does Pep sub on Doku, either for Kovacic or Rico Lewis? Take your pick, because they needed someone to at least have an outlet and then to take a fullback on 1v1, and they just weren't doing it. Funny enough, Arsenal brought on Martinelli, and that is what they did. And the first chance in the entire game, at least the first shot on goal, came with Martinelli being on the pitch. It's just a hopeful chance, but at least Arsenal, force Ederson to at least touch the ball with his gloves. Rice does a really good job here to poach the ball off Rico Lewis. I keep going on Declan Rice a little bit. Rice was spectacular in the second half. It's worth saying that. Uh, so he does well to poach the ball off Rico Lewis, and then Rice plays in Martinelli the pass. So Rice actually he doesn't just win the ball back. He has a really good pass. He has a good like line splitting pass to feed in Martinelli. Kind of into the box. He is from a tight angle, but he does a good job to at least take the shot. He forces Everton to at least work a little bit. Um, but as you watched the game in the second half, you just saw Kevin De Bruyne's miss really showing up. Jeremy talked about that last week. Just no one was looking to play Holland the ball in behind or to cross him. And I thought another note that I had yesterday was Arsenal had figured City out. Arsenal had four players in the middle, almost high marking, not necessarily pressing the ball, and they weren't really pressing Ederson that much. So they allowed Ederson to have the ball. They allowed Diaz. They allowed Ake to have the ball, and they kind of forced them to play. And they allowed Kyle Walker and Gvardiol to be open. And when those guys got the ball on the wing, Walker and Gvardiol, that's when Arsenal would shift over, and City didn't have a way to advance the ball after that. Too often they were going backwards or in recycling possession, and this was happening a lot. And that basically described the second half. City didn't want to risk losing the ball, didn't want to try anything. I guess dangerous. I think they were also worried about Declan Rice being able to actually get the ball off Rico Lewis and Kovacic a couple of times in the second half, and they stopped trying to even play through the middle. Arsenal basically took Man City's game plan out the window by this in the second half, and people have been going, maybe Arsenal were lucky in this game. I don't think so. Arsenal actually went into this with a pretty good game plan, better than Man City and Arsenal tried to kind of do the same things, try to copy each other, but Arsenal did a better job of it. Um, and I think I would have had that take even had this game ended 0-0, just because of the way Arsenal at least they at least did things to dictate the game, where I thought Man City were a little bit more reactive. I think that's kind of the way to say it. And then another note I had was just a thing that kept showing up over and over again is just Man City don't have attacking fullbacks, at least in this game. Kyle Walker didn't really want to go forward, and neither did Gvardiol. And the thing that was interesting was just a couple of days ago, we saw Lens beat Arsenal with wide wingbacks on Zinchenko's side. and they didn't have wingers outside of Doku, but they didn't have any kind of passers on the wing to get Holland some service. And that said, there was maybe a moment in like the I don't know the 65th to maybe 75th kind of minute where Man City did have a couple moments. They were able to get Foden the ball in a dangerous spot, but it was all very in before and in between essentially. So I mean, there was a half chance. I guess Rico Lewis gets the ball, tries to play in Holland in behind, but Saliba is able to shoulder Holland off the like to the ground. Arsenal having Saliba this game as opposed to Holden was everything. And then there was maybe that one time when they did have numbers with Arsenal's backline in a kind of a bad spot. Holland is making a run on the right side of the field this time. And the reason why I think this is an issue is because the ball is played to Phil Foden. Finally, City have someone other than Holland in the box, and it kind of confused Arsenal a little bit here. And if Foden, I mentioned this yesterday, if Foden has a better first touch, this is probably the first goal of the game, and it was just this was the one chance when they finally had Man City finally had Arsenal a little bit in a danger spot, and just that one touch kind of let Foden down. Um, and then we'll get to the goal, and it is a long ball to Tomiyasu sent in by Thomas Partey. City are laying off him, and finally someone takes over. Finally, someone breaks open a dead game. Tomiyasu makes a great run, and Foden is caught sleeping. But Partey's ball is perfect because it splits the center back and fullback. So it splits Kyle Walker and Ruben Diaz, and then Tomiyasu heads it to Havertz. Havertz has good control. I thought he was going to do a little bit more. I thought he was going to turn and actually try to get the shot away, but he does a decent job to at least get City players to get all their attention on him, and he's able to control this and find Martinelli, and then Martinelli takes the shot, and it deflects off Ake, but at least someone Martinelli could have uh, tried to recycle this. The shot wasn't necessarily on, and no, he decided to take a chance, and it is lucky it goes in, but finally someone at least asked some questions of City, and finally someone took a chance. Party, Martinelli, Tomiyasu, and um, well, I guess habits you can say. And it's just Martinelli didn't start this game, and he didn't play versus Tottenham, and you can see how much he's been missed for them. And funny enough, he's the kind of player that Pep has decided he doesn't like playing with anymore. Just a direct chance taking winger, and Pep has a Jeremy Doku. And I thought he waited too long. He did finally show up in the second half, but I thought he waited too long to bring him on. And I also wanted to make this note that it was fitting the goal. This goal won the game because the game was crying out for width the entire game, and basically the start of this goal comes from Martinelli's positioning at the start. He's staying wide. He's staying on the touchline. And when Party gets the ball, he has the option to actually play Martinelli, and Kyle Walker sees that, and Kyle Walker shifts over. And so I think Party maybe actually was trying to go for Martinelli first, and Kyle Walker shifted over, and then that allowed Tomiyasu to make the run. So it's a really heads-up play by by Partey and also Tomiyasu. Tomiyasu recognizes, hey, Kyle Walker shift over. There's actually a gap here because I'm at a goal side of Phil Foden, and Ruben Diaz and Kyle Walker cannot cover this 20-yard space by themselves. And Tomiyasu makes that run, and that's where Partey plays the ball to. And then Tommy also, does a good job to pick out Havertz, and then Havertz has a little of that role, and it is good to get Havertz going. It's been kind of the two stories of Arsenal this season have been Rice coming in. I think the general take has been Rice having a better time of it. Especially out of possession, I can admit that I do. I mentioned it yesterday. I have my thoughts a little bit when he's a little bit less good on the ball, I guess maybe you could say, because he doesn't pass through lines. He doesn't take a risk. Essentially, I actually feel like he'd be a perfect player for Pep the way they're playing these days. Uh, but that said, uh, it's not necessarily and the other one is Havertz, and uh, it's taken a while for them to kinda get going. It doesn't Havertz isn't a midfielder, and I think Arteta's finally starting to figure that out. I am curious if in the beginning, when they got in Julian Timber, I'm curious if maybe the idea was to actually kinda do almost a back 3 and then a 2, and then almost like a front 4 with Havertz and Odegaard kinda being double tens, and then with, like, Jesus. And the idea was actually to have Jesus have a free roll, out wide and or up top, and and Jesus' role, or I guess Nketiah, would have been to make runs wherever you wanted to at least draw defenders out of position, and then that's when Havertz from kind of the double 10 role, that's when Havertz would have become like a makeshift striker to be a number into the box. I am curious if that was the idea, and the injury to someone like Timber kind of put that on the back burner. Because otherwise, in a 4-3-3, it doesn't feel like Havertz can play in that midfield kind of role. Maybe in a 4-2-3-1, he can be kind of the 10, but that is what Odegaard's role is. So it has been, I think that's kind of given Arteta a little fits, and that's sometimes been a bit of the storyline as well. Versus Man United, Havertz did play, and then kind of the player that kind of changed the game was Fabio Vieira, and Fabio Vieira started versus Spurs, and that didn't work out for them because he wasn't able to handle the physicality of playing as a third midfielder either. So Arsenal are first in the table, and it just feels the optimistic side. I think you can say is they're first in the table, and it doesn't feel like they found themselves yet. So for me, kind of being a little, I don't want to say negative, but kind of being a little bit more skeptical. Maybe I shouldn't be. And the parallels to what Arsenal are trying to do, basically, losing that title to Man City, on the just kind of in a crushing fashion last season. That is similar to what Liverpool first did in 2018-19, before they went on and turned around and won it in 19 and 20. And it can go two ways. That sometimes can drive you to even further, or it can be really demoralizing and hard to pick yourselves back up. A lot of people maybe forget in that early stretch, in that 19 to 20 season, Liverpool won a lot of games ugly. Like, a lot of games were 1-1 going into the 70th minute, and somehow Liverpool found a way to just kind of get crazy results, like 2-1 kind of results at the very end when they weren't necessarily playing well. And then just so they kind of rode that momentum. They smashed Man City in December, and then everything just kind of fell into their lap. Man City also had some injuries to the back. I think they lost Laporte, and they maybe lost Diaz. And I think they were playing someone like I think they were playing Fernandinho at center back for like a couple good months of that. So that was the reason why City were kind of out of it. But Liverpool just did not lose a game until I think like February, even though they weren't necessarily playing well. So it is possible that Arsenal are trying to follow that kind of path. And when you look at having someone like Saliba back, their back line is as good as I guess any, honestly, in the league. It was spectacular last season with Saliba in, and maybe there's no reason to necessarily doubt that Arsenal can kind of do something similar. Um, I mean, we'll see. That's maybe the optimistic side. I've been kind of hedging a little bit, but in this game, I do think it's worth because there have been a lot of takes being like, oh, maybe Arsenal were just kind of lucky. I think they were worthy winners. I mean, you have to remember, Kovacic should have been sent off, for one. But the game was crying out. Both teams were missing key players, and the game was crying out for a change. And Arteta did change it. Bringing on Martinelli, bringing on the 4 subs that actually, created the goal. And another thing too was, we spoke about it last week. Arteta went into this with a mistake at the Emirates at the Etihad last April, uh, when they got caught kind of high pressing. And that was also you can't necessarily high press when you don't have a back line that can handle playing a high defensive line. That's kind of a note I keep repeating myself over, but I need to. Uh, and with Saliba, you can kinda get caught, you can get away, with doing it, but even they weren't necessarily, pressing high, that's something that I need to reiterate as well. They were just marking high. They were, keeping the options very, very limited, for Man City to do anything with. I mean, the XG was quite poor for both teams. 0.39 for Arsenal, 0.48, for Man City, 12 shots and 2 on target, 4 shots and 1 for Man City. It's the second week in a row for Man City has had under, point 0.5 XG. It's worth saying that as well. Possession was about the same. Passing was, 433, 87% for Man City, or for Arsenal, and 451, 87% for Man City. And then the thing I mentioned yesterday was the crossing. The crossing was surprising to me. Only 1 for 10. When you have someone like Holland, you weren't really trying to take a chance And kind of the themes I hit last week, yesterday, I guess I'll maybe say again. Saliba back was everything. I think he was the MVP of the game. It's not really necessarily going to show, but I think that was kind of he took Holland completely out of the game, to be honest. And uh, Declan Rice and Nketiah, I think Nketiah has kind of struggled a little bit in some of these games to get involved, but off the ball, the work rate he had was incredible in this game, and he just covered so much ground, just kind of chasing the ball in the second half, and he was preventing passing lanes to City, trying to look to pass the ball through the middle. Again, Arsenal figured out that when City got the ball out wide, it was a diversion almost. They wanted to open up the middle. They didn't really care about attacking down the wings. Uh, and then Declan Rice, again in possession, I do think it is interesting that Arteta doesn't necessarily trust him. He went with Jorginho, but it worked. Uh, and again, Nketiah, praise. You can praise Declan Rice, and you can praise Odegaard. All four were the reason why basically it was 4v3 in that central area where City wanted to, try to find those passing lanes, and they couldn't. They were outnumbered the entire time. So it was very, again, it's not necessarily luck that Arsenal got here, um, and I, both. I mentioned like maybe the optimistic side for Arsenal. Man City and Arsenal are both kind of struggling to create chances this game. Man City though have Kevin De Bruyne that's about to join them back in November and January. Arsenal, hard to necessarily, if I mentioned it yesterday with Jeremy, if you get Saka back, how much does this change? I guess you imagine Jesus plays in that central striker spot. Does that really change Arsenal's attack? Well, maybe Martinelli starts and Saka. Maybe. You could say that. Um, but yeah, again, it's just the reason why I guess people have been maybe less enthusiastic to embrace Arsenal than last season. And Jeremy spoke about it yesterday as well. Arsenal are not as fun and free flowing as they were last year. Last year, they were playing liquid football, to be honest. And it seems teams have maybe figured out, well, one, Declan Rice doesn't necessarily like to play, risky passes, so sometimes the passing lanes are aren't necessarily to open up a team or to play through a team. And I think teams know what happens when Odegaard gets the ball, and Odegaard's having to do maybe too much. And it seems maybe Saka has been overplayed, and there's been some of that, but enough of the negativity, I guess I can say. Arteta subs win the game. It's also good for Tomiyasu. It's worth saying that as well, because he was responsible for the goal at the Emirates last February, and he plays a role in the game winning goal. And again, just this game really did show that you need to be able, you can't just play narrow football, especially versus a very good team. And that's just kind of that was the issue with both Arsenal and Man City, and it's kind of weird because usually at least last season, both teams had no issues keeping the pitch stretched. And I think one maybe thing I didn't say about the optimistic case is Thomas Partey coming back. Now, or is Arteta going to play him back at right back like he was doing? Because in the beginning, in the first couple of games of the season, that's what he was doing. If you remember, it wasn't Ben White. Ben White was maybe playing as kind of a center back, and Thomas Partey was like a fake inverted right back. Essentially, he was in midfield, but also kind of tucking in on the right side, and it wasn't really working. And it didn't work last year versus Nottingham Forest either. But you have Zinchenko back. You have Jesus back, and now you have Thomas Partey back with Saliba. You finally have that core. And we don't necessarily know how long Saka will be out, but you have Martinelli now. So maybe in the coming games, Arsenal are finally going to have that main core. You can include Odegaard in that as well. They're going to have that main core to finally play with each other for the first time this season. And maybe that'll bring back what they were doing last year. Maybe you can find a way to take some of the ball playing responsibilities away from Rice by giving it to Thomas Partey if Arteta is able to play both Partey and Rice together. Now I think we did see that in the Community Shield, if I remember right. We did see Rice and Partey play together. Again, I do think their issues are solvable. With Man City, yeah, I think it's more of a case of when does Kevin De Bruyne come back, or a case of not necessarily playing Saliba and not playing and finally getting Roger back. I mean, we mentioned it yesterday that there's just 3 games without Rodri, 3 losses. That definitely showed up, and just no ways to find Holland service for the last couple of games. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne has missed showing up. It was weird. Also, sometimes Phil Foden and Alvarez playing together, they because they like playing in the same spaces, they kind of cancel each other out. Or I don't want to say redundant. But it, when you have two offensive players like trying to play in the same spaces and defenses know that. So when Phil Foden gets the ball and he's trying to take on his defender. If he's next to Alvarez, that means Alvarez's defender is in that same position. So Phil Foden technically has to take on 2 defenders. That's kind of a way to look at this, and that was happening a lot. So Pep needs to find a way to stretch it out. Again, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Grealish, but I think Grealish would have solved this. Doku obviously would have changed this up either, and given either Phil Foden or Alvarez the chance to play make in the middle, since both like doing that. Take your pick. Foden's probably a better player to play there, but Alvarez probably scores you more goals. Or Pep should maybe think of switching in Holland and Alvarez a little bit. That seems crazy to say, but if they're not even going to look for him and he's just going to be a diversion to just kind of make runs for everyone else, I think the idea was to have Holland stretch their back line, and then that would have created a little space for the double tens of Alvarez and Foden to operate in, and Arsenal just weren't falling for it. Uh, and again, not every team has Saliba, so maybe it's not the end of the world. Um, but it is very weird to say because just this team, Man City did not have an issue stretching the pitch last year. Now they had Mahrez. It's worth saying that. Bernardo Silva can maybe stretch it out, and again, Grealish can as well. At least when it comes to not necessarily crossing in or anything, because Grealish gets the ball and he wants to immediately cut inside too. But what Grealish is actually, I'll praise him here. He's actually pretty good at trying to receive the ball on the touchline. And, that's what this game was requiring out, force Arsenal to defend a little further out, and they just weren't able to do that, and I mean, again, the optimistic side is Man City is going to get Rodri back, now, uh, and, I do think Jeremy thinks it's gonna be a little bit of a bump. I don't necessarily think that, but, yeah, he could be right, and I could be wrong. The thing that is crazy is just how Pep just anytime a team beats him on a transition moment, he becomes like Jose Mourinho, to be honest, where he morphs into being almost I don't wanna say a pragmatist. I don't wanna say the T word either. Tony Pulis. Um, he instead of he doesn't wanna open the game, he just cares about having defenders in a position to where if you do lose the ball, you're not in a dangerous spot. You've got defenders in a good defensive position in that situation, and to the only way to actually do that, one you can kind of counter press. I guess that's the way the Klopp likes playing. If you lose the ball, you counter press to try to win it back, so you have numbers really high up near the ball. So when that way, and you can outnumber teams that way sometimes. And if you can just always win the ball, you're never really going to be in a danger moment. In Pep's kind of case here, he just doesn't want his defenders or fullbacks to go up, because that kind of stretches that you only have 2 center backs at that point, and so it seemed he just cared about having so many defensive players, on the field to just kind of defend against losing the ball against those transition moments, and in that case, you're only playing with 4, maybe 3 attackers at sometimes, and so it is hard you are really reliant on Holland just kind of being your own attack. Maybe a Foden or Alvarez to get on something that Holland creates or not. And a lot of the passes that are tried are played, to the wings where if you lose the ball, it's not really going to matter. Um, and again, it is crazy because someone that could have maybe, broken this game up, coming on at least in the second half would have been someone like Cancelo. Cancelo being able to like overlap or create either on the left side or even or even the right side. Now I know Pep doesn't like him because he got burned a little bit in the Liverpool game last year with Salah, but Cancelo is flying for Barcelona now, and it's not even he's not even a Barcelona player. He's a loanee, and it is crazy how Pep loaned him out to Bayern Munich last year, and again, it's just Pep doesn't like having an attacking minded fullback anymore because an attack minded fullback means you're playing higher up the field, and if you lose the ball, that you can play. There is space to kind of attack down that side, and it is crazy to say this with Pep Guardiola, someone that for the longest time, you used to think you used to tune into Man City games. They would win a lot, but they would also be pleasing on the eye and be fun. And like Jeremy said last yesterday, they're not anymore. And I think it really is because of that. And then we'll move on to Man United and Brentford. I mean, the first goal from Jensen, and then McTominay with the double. And the leading off story was Ten Hag and Onana because of what happened in the Champions League. And unfortunately, Onana and I don't want to say necessarily Ten Hag was the storyline after this, but Onana definitely was. But Man United went with Maguire and Evans as the starting back line, with Lindelof as like the left back, Amrabat and Casemiro as the midfield, and then it was Bruno right wing, Mount in the middle, Rashford and Hoyland, and so no Varane, Evans and Maguire starting, and Bruno and Mount tried together, and Lindelof at fullback, he's isn't really a fullback, he's not going to offer Rashford a lot of service, a lot of overlap. It is, or I guess supply, and you can see just by looking at that lineup, this is going to be a mess, and it was. And then Brentford went with the 3-5-2 that Jeremy talked about, Bremer and Wisa up top with Ayer, Pennick, and Collins. And Pennick and Collins have actually struggled in a lot of these games recently, where they've had the ball and all they've been able to do is just kind of go long. They've been struggling for options, just kind of build the ball back and just keep it a little bit. Having that third center back, Ayer, helped with that. They were much better this game, at least in the first half. In the second half, it kind of all went out the door. But they were good doing that. And another thing too is because you have to remember, Man United cannot press them high because you have Evans and Maguire, and Evans and Maguire were sitting off, and that's the reason why Brentford were somewhat having a pretty decent. They were enjoying themselves, at least in that first half. There were a couple of times when Bremer and Wisa were getting the ball, and they'd have, if you could get behind Casemiro, you had some space to run in behind. And that was a bit of a storyline in this game. Another thing too was no Flecken and Strakosha started, and yikes! I mentioned yesterday the parry that he had, just for the offside on the goal that McTominay scores. It's a fantastic goal. You can't take away anything away from the touch and the finish that he has. Fair enough, but uh, after Garnacho had that, this is what I forgot yesterday. After Garnacho had that really good play to get on the byline and then to have a cutback cross, it's Dallo that gets on the ball first. And Dallow's shot it's a decent shot, but what happens is it's kind of hit right at Strakosha, and he parries it again, and he parries it in the middle right into the danger. And that's where a better keeper maybe even catches this. So that ended up showing up. And Onana didn't have his best go of it either. Early in the game, there were a couple of Brentford chances, two from corner kicks and two from Hickey. There was a Pennick block on Mount, so there were a few times that Man United were actually able to go long with Onana. They actually did. Onana's service actually was quite good. He has a weapon with that long foot. His problem is sometimes he likes to just kind of show off that leg. He likes to show off that muscle leg, and he hits it too far. And sometimes he's actually just literally kicking it all the way back to the goalkeeper. That was happening a couple times. But when he's able to dial it in, and when he's got someone open, he can hit him in a way that David De Gea can't do. But his issues are coming with the saves, and sometimes he's also, yeah, as we saw in the Champions League game, sometimes kicking it to the other team. Um, but yeah, Anana also screwed up here, and he was lucky. He was lucky here with the ref blowing a foul on Wisa because, again, it looks like Wisa almost pitches it off him, kind of similar to what Alvarez did for Raya. And again, him going short is shaky, but him going long is good. And then we get to the goal, and it starts with Man United having a free kick, and Maguire plays it to Casemiro. Casemiro thinks he can play this to Amrabat. But Embremo reads it and intercepts it, and then Weisse is able to carry the ball into Man United penalty area. Again, you can do this because immediately, Maguire's first thought is to run backwards because he doesn't want anyone. If he engages and Weisse is able to just kick it to the side, Maguire is beaten. And Evans was kind of doing the same thing. So once they were able to get past Casemiro, they had a lot of space to at least get the ball into the penalty area essentially, and then from here Lindelof has a poor touch. He gives the ball right back, and then the ball bounces off Casemiro. I don't necessarily think this is Casemiro's fault. His fault was the pass earlier in this sequence, and then it finds its way to Jensen, and then he drives a shot low, and it just creeps underneath Onana's glove. And there were a lot of errors here. It's not just Onana, but Onana needed to make the save given how he performed in the midweek. It wasn't necessarily his best moment. And then maybe the one chance that maybe had that came for United was Rashford, and it's probably their best effort of the game, and it came after Rashford has successfully got through three players, so he had to do a lot of this on his own, and it's because he didn't have someone like a Luke Shaw or even a Regulon to at least offer an overlap to at least take away a defender. So I mean, in Brentford, we're having they had a wing back to defend, and they also had Ayer, and Ayer was doing a fantastic job on Rashford, but he finally found a way to get through a couple players, and he forced Strakosha into a save, and he this is like the one time when he got to the ground and he did what Onana couldn't do. I think that was kind of the story of the first half, to be honest. Both teams only had one real clear cut chance, and Onana's hand wasn't able to get to the ground fast enough, and Strakosha was, but the theme in the entire first half was there was no width at all on the right side. Bruno was being wasted, and Lindelof, I thought at left back was backfiring too, and you didn't understand the role that Mason Mount and Bruno had together. Um, and then so the interesting so Jeremy asked me what I would do in the at halftime in attacks, and I was like, hey, bring on a Palestri or Antony. Just kind of find a way to actually. I think I said Palestri, not even Antony, because I wanted someone to get stretch the pitch out a little bit on the right side. And the interesting, or I think I also said maybe bring Amrabat, move him to the left back, take Lindelof off. I think I said that because that wasn't really working out. Or even I think I said maybe move take Maguire off or Evans off and move Lindelof back into a defense because that wasn't that backfired entirely, in my opinion. So Ten Hag got the first half incredibly wrong, in my opinion. And the interesting thing here is he did make a football move. He did kind of do something a little bit outside the box. Now I don't know if Casemiro was actually asked to come off. I don't know if he was dealing with maybe fatigue or not because he wasn't really good in that first half. And Ericsson came on for Casemiro. And well, the funny thing enough is he's also a former Brentford player, and I should have asked Jeremy this yesterday. I kind of forgot. Is what was his feeling with this? He knew because I feel like I could also imagine what that would have been. But if this also what this did is it moved Mason Mount out wide and moved Bruno centrally, and at least Bruno was able to get on the ball a little bit more. Mason Mount still was able to offer nothing. But this change gave maybe Man United's best chance in the second half, at least before all the McTominay stuff happened. So it's also a first real warning shine, I think, of Strakosha being a liability. So Ericsson just fires a shot from range. It should be comfortable, but Strakosha spills it, and if anyone's in the area, there's probably a tap in for them. So it's just Haaland or Rashford weren't able to read this. Uh, but a game note I had was United needed to find a way to drop Pickford out because too often he was just a cross was coming in or he was just finding a way to get in the way of a shot or a block every single time, and he was if any kind of cross he was winning. Um, and then Brentford nearly scored on a long throw. It felt like maybe if Brentford were going to get back in this, it would have been something from a set piece. And then Rashford came off for Garnacho and Mount came off for Anthony. And here we have Man United with a breakaway, and Anthony can't pick out the runner because he doesn't have a right foot. He tries to do this, outside the foot kind of pass, and it doesn't come off. And this is like the one like real negative I think of him. It's crazy to me to pay what they paid. I think it was close to 90 million euros on a player that is so run footed. And, it's also crazy to me, you have a professional that is I don't necessarily wanna go into a rant that much, but I don't understand how a professional that gets paid a certain wage, that does training every single day. Why? How cannot someone improve with their weaker foot? Even at this level, you don't have to be spectacular. You just have to have it. I've had that issue a little bit with Salah, but anyways, and then there's a chance for Bruno, and he was really quiet here, but at least him playing centrally, he's able to get a good shot from the top of the box. And again, Scotia makes a save, which you expect him to make, but it's another parry. And then Brentford are under at the 75th minute. Brentford are under real pressure, pretty much since the second half subs changed, and there's no outlet to escape it or relieve it, to advance the ball upfield because Rice has come off since now, and they're just struggling to keep hold of the ball at all. And then there's a chance for Garnacho, and it's much better from United here. So Anthony gets the ball, and he uses Dallo to make an overlap on the right side, and Dallo finally offers some width on this side, and he sends a decent ball across the field, and it finds Garnacho. And the shot just kind of misses, but it's quicker movement by United. That's one thing to say too, and just they're using more of the pitch to attack here. Dallo was able to play a little bit higher up after Wiza went off. That's worth saying as well. Dallo was having to worry about the two slow center backs that Man United had. And then maybe the one chance Brentford had was Malpai was able to kind of force Onana into a decent diving save, and then they did get a corner kick, and that forced Onana to save Norgard's header. Um, and then that was pretty much the best chance that came their way. It was batten down the hatches, defend for your lives for the final 10 minutes, and they got the warning sign with the first goal that was called back for offsides, and they weren't able to get away with the second. So it's another precocious spill. But so Fernandez sends a really good ball into the box, looking for McTominay. So you see McTominay already being on the pitch, influencing things. Brentford cleared away, but the rebound falls to Garnacho, and then Garnacho takes on Roslev. It does a really clever turn to get to the byline, and then swings a cutback cross back before the ball goes out of bounds, and then Dallo gets on the ball and has a shot, but it's saved by Strakosha, but he spills it. And this time he's not saved by that. And from there, the ball is bouncing, and McTominay has an amazing first-class touch to bring this down. First, because he brings it out high with his leg, and then he's able to hit it with a second touch into the corner of the net, and it's an unreal finish by him. And a bit like with Man United having errors for Brentford's goal, there are multiple ways to prevent this for Brentford, and just kind of unlucky. And it's worth kind of saying as well, when you are defending for your lives for 20 minutes on end, that can be also not just physically exhausting but mentally exhausting, and just that kind of, I think, showed up. Another thing that showed up was for their final goal. Uh, Brentford have the ball. And there's no reason for them to give a free kick. If Brentford have the ball, they pass it back to Strakosha, and Strakosha just goes long. And that's fine to go long. That I'm not necessarily going to go against that, but Bremo is trying to find a way to win this, find a way to win a free kick, and all he does is he goes up and it hits his hand, and that gives Man United the free kick. And then, yeah, from there, the ball is sent in. Harry Maguire wins the first header, and it's a double header. And McTominay is in front of Pennick, and he's able to knock the second one in. Maybe this could have been saved. Also, that's maybe a little harsh, but this was more just kind of unfortunate. I didn't necessarily feel like United deserved this, but at the same time, as much as Ten Hag got the first half wrong, he did fix up and got the second half right. I think he does deserve credit there. Um, I mean, this did feel crushing for Brentford. And yeah, you didn't necessarily hear it in Jeremy his voice yesterday, but I think after the text, it kind of that kind of came out. But they were defending for their lives the final 20 minutes or so. They had no way to keep the ball at all, and maybe a new life for either United or maybe McTominay. Then again, I don't necessarily know where you play him. Um, Man United had 20 shots and 8 on target, 1.4 xG. Brentford point 0.9, 11 shots and 3 for Brentford. Brentford with 36 possession, 237 passes, 72%. So it's not. It's I mentioned how maybe with the back three they were a little bit better keeping the ball, at least in the first half. In the second half, that all went away. And then Man United with 488, 88%. And the kind of funny thing about this is I was weirdly, I think I mentioned it last podcast, or at least a week ago. I was a little bit more bullish on what I was seeing from United. at least in their 2 losses, and they lost to Crystal Palace and they lost in Champions League game, than I was in this win. But they also the personnel and everything, just tactics entirely changed. So maybe I can get away with that thinking again because I didn't see this was just a mess, to be honest. And basically, it's typical United. I mean, Garnacho coming on changed the game, and they're saved by someone. It's hero ball. It's hero ball, not from Bruno or Rashford. It's McTominay. And he was an attacker. He was asked to be in the box, and he is. And we talked about it last week. I mean, the Mount is not necessarily working out for them. Anthony returns, but he still plays narrow. I don't necessarily think he's the answer. I do think it's Palestri. To be honest, I was surprised he didn't because I felt he played well versus Palace, and I thought he played well in the Champions League game. And I kind of feel like he should play more. To be honest, and again, just Man United are just. I have no idea what to think of them. To be honest, one week I kind of feel like they're doing stuff. I do think it was interesting to see Christian Eriksen come in with Casemiro coming out. Jeremy mentioned how he thinks maybe Casemiro is his legs are kind of leggy and tired. That could be something. He is older, and they played him a lot last season in a way that we weren't really expecting. He also had, and anytime they missed him, not necessarily having his best moments, he had a couple of stretches where he got like 2 reds in a row, and that's when Man United kind of had their dip. And with him back in the squad, that changed. But so them getting Amrabat actually is really big because they were able to play him in that kind of holding deep defensive midfielder kind of ball winning kind of a position, and they weren't really missing Casemiro at least in this game. So that was surprising. But I mentioned how it was interesting that Mason Mount, how Man United targeted him, and they didn't. I mentioned how I was surprised maybe someone like Madison. That was foolish on my end. Madison and Mount would have kind of probably given them the same dynamic with Bruno. Bruno, you have your creative 10. You needed someone that is a pivot midfielder, someone that can be either both a ball winner and someone that's good with the ball at their feet. So someone like Alexis McAllister. Honestly, I didn't think it would have been Szoboszlai, but a player that immediately comes to mind is someone like Caicedo. Now, again, given the way that Chelsea spent so much for him, maybe Man United were like, hell no, we can't do that. But you did pay uh, 70 or so million for Mountain, and Caicedo. I think was at the time. I think he was listed at 90. He ended up being a lot more than that. But that is the kind of player that I feel like they missed. They also have someone named Kobe Mano who did look good in the summer league or in the summer games. And he ended up getting he messed up his ankle, and from what I saw is he's close to being back to training. And maybe the idea is they didn't do anything like that because they have this guy. And the reason why I bring him up is he looked quite good at getting the ball and turning it and being able to advance the ball. And he seemed kind of a player that they just haven't had. You mentioned how you can think back to the last couple of years. They've had, everyone was making fun of McTominay, and Fred in that pivot role, and it was they were never really good with the ball at their feet. You know, Looking back, maybe it wasn't necessarily De Gea's fault. De Gea just never had options. You also had Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire isn't necessarily the best with the ball at his feet, and so there's been it's been time for them to go through some change, and maybe that is kind of going through. There a lot of people have been going after Ten Hag. I don't necessarily know how much this is his fault. Now, he got the first half entirely wrong, but he did at least get the second half right. But I think I mentioned it yesterday. I think it's more of the ownership, the people up top. And maybe you can go at Ten Hag for targeting his former players. But if you had a better structure in the club, if you had a football director that had his own kind of say and power, not necessarily to just do what Ten Hag wants, you'd have someone that would be able to stop some of that. I just don't feel like they have like the best run teams have teams that have good football directors, independent, that have their own kind of power, their own kind of operation, where the manager just kind of the manager has the idea to manage the players that he has. Maybe he has some input, but not necessarily all of it. So I think that's kind of been a bit of an undoing for Ten Hag. I think Ten Hag also wanted someone like Gakpo. He wanted someone like Nunes. He wasn't able to get them. Jeremy mentioned Hoyland. Hoyland has had a pretty good, at least early start. To The goals haven't been there, but at least he's getting into good positions. I do think the goals will come. So that's maybe kind of the positive side you can look for Man United. And one thing I wanted to say yesterday that I kind of forgot is I did like them hiring Ten Hag simply because the player that all of the the influencers, the Roy Keanes, the Rio Ferdinands, the the former players that are always on TV, for Sky. They wanted Pochettino, and they were trying to doing desperately. They were responsible for Ali getting the extension. They were trying to do they were trying to keep their influence, and instead the club finally went with someone else. And it was the first time where the club kind of broke away from that little Ferguson kind of triangle. And I felt like that was the club moving in the right direction. And maybe it hasn't necessarily worked out yet, but I think that at least was positive. Also, you're not necessarily seeing Pochettino flying at least out of the gates. It's not really easy to just come in and change a mess. I think because of the job that Ten Hag did last season, it was more of an overperformance than necessarily, oh, he's going to just take this team that he has from, being I don't know, mid-table, not necessarily that, but being like seventh and eighth, to not only being top four to all of a sudden being title contenders. And progression is going to be linear. That it doesn't always the case. So I think it's worth kind of saying that. And then they're missing Luke Shaw, they're missing Lissandro Martinez, Wan-Bissaka, Varane, and that Kobe Mano guy. So that's maybe the positives you can say about Man United. I did go a little long there. And with Brentford, it is a little rough. I mentioned it last week. I am curious if they could find a way to do maybe a 3-4-3 or even a 4-4-2 with Norgard and Jensen as a double pivot. I don't feel like the any of the other midfielders are good enough on the ball. And I also feel like if you could do a 4-3-3 and get kind of with maybe from wing backs, maybe you could play three attackers but playing narrow. But when the way that he's asking, he when he does a 4-3-3, when he does these other formations, his attackers are kind of getting bullied a little bit. Lewis Potter is getting bullied. Aaron Hickey's doing a decent job. Roslov, I guess, is doing okay when he's playing as a fullback. But the attackers aren't necessarily working a ton, and you don't really understand where is Maupay going to necessarily fit into this. He doesn't really have a lot of pace. You got to find a way to get that pace from elsewhere. Um, and yeah, they are struggling with injuries, as we mentioned. Shada, Rico Henry, and whatnot. And so the forward depth is an issue, and yeah, you have to look at this as maybe an opportunity dropped because the back line was Maguire and Evans as a CB partnership, and they just weren't able to punish that. And then I'll move on to Liverpool and Brighton. We'll see how we're doing for time. That's not that bad. And, I don't necessarily need to spend a ton of time on this because we did talk about it a little bit yesterday. So the first goal comes from Adingra, and then Salah gets the two, one with the PK, and then Dunk is able to get one at the second half from a free kick. And it was interesting because Brighton avoided it as a disaster in Europe in the midweek. They started off being down 2-0 to Marseille, and they were able to claw back. But the game recap was, as Jeremy said, this was a little bit of a better game to watch than the Arsenal and City one was. And with Liverpool, Trent was back in the starting 11, and it was interesting to see Elliott start, but he wasn't really able to kind of influence the game a ton. He did play a role a little bit in the first goal that they scored, but they hooked him for Gravenberch, maybe to give Liverpool a little bit more of a physicality kind of sense because it felt like this game was a little bit of who can win their duels, essentially. And Gravenberch is a lot bigger. But yeah, Gravenberch had a chance to put the game away and kind of missed, and it is unfortunate because it's taken a while for me to kind of get on board with him because I wanted a defensive minded midfielder. I wanted someone like maybe Decore to come in, not necessarily him. Uh, but he's fun. He's got go gadget legs, and he gets by players for fun. He's sneaky fast, or not necessarily fast. He's got these long legs. He can get by people for fun. He kind of he moves a little bit like Cody Gakpo, where you don't feel like Cody Gakpo is that fast, and then he's just got those long legs. He can just stride for days. Uh, and with Brighton went with Solly Marsh at left back, and I was like, oh crap. You see this, and you're like, Adengra is probably a better player than Marsh, a little bit more creative on the wing. You got Ferguson, Matoma, Pedro underneath, and you have an attack minded left back in Solly Marsh, and you were like, uh oh. But the interesting was to see Carlos Belba actually get a debut start, and man, was he good. And not only was he good, because Pascal Gross wasn't good, he was amazing. So he was almost like kind of playing midfield by himself. Um, so I mean, the couple early chances did come to Brighton's way. Liverpool were struggling to defend a few corner kicks, and you kind of saw, the few times that Brighton were able to kind of get a couple set pieces. This was a danger moment, and then Brighton get the goal, and they just kind of pitched the ball off McAllister. It's not. This isn't really his fault. Also, this had to be ecstasy for Brighton fans because McAllister, again, former Brighton player, wanted to enjoy his time there, but he also enjoyed kind of moving to a different club. But here, Allison starts out of possession, and Danger just kind of passes it into his own net. But I don't. I was getting at McAllister a little bit. This one isn't his fault. It's worth saying that. But it's maybe the second or third time in the first 20 minutes where McAllister has looked uncomfortable. But Virgil van Dijk should not play this pass. This is on him, in my opinion. He's closed down immediately. I don't even think he has a chance to even look up and get the ball. He just Danger is right there. He reads it and gets it off him. Uh, but, it is funny because there's this it's obsession now with keepers being good with the ball at their feet, and the more teams sit off keepers, the priority kind of needs to be on defenders to be good with the ball at their feet, and Van Dijk is one of those defenders, but, he made up a mess here, kind of, trusting that he could fit this ball in when he couldn't. But, the note I had was Liverpool were pressing very narrow and high. So, Szoboszlai and Nunes were both worried about the keeper having being the outlet than necessarily Dunk or, Dunk and Hugo Julio. They didn't care when they had the ball. And Luis Diaz was trying to mark the fullback higher up the field because Brighton liked playing with those high fullbacks in the beginning to kind of stretch the pitch out a little bit different. There were a couple of times though when that wasn't really working. There were a couple of times when they were able to get Veltman or Marsh to get down the field. But it was interesting to kind of see that strategy, and then there was a good chance for Carlos Balba, and here it shows where basically Liverpool are weak, and it is kind of that DM spot in the middle. So he carries us like 60 yards all the way to the top of Liverpool's box, and then he kind of chops inside to full Trent, and then tries a shot. Trent does a good job actually here to close down on him, but he just the chop inside fools him, and then we'll get to the goal in the 40th minute, and finally Brighton play a bad pass. They get the ball off Salah, and then Ferguson plays it backwards to Lewis Dunk, and then from there Dunk plays a very risky ball that Liverpool can break on. Alexis reads us, so I was kind of going at him a little bit. He makes it up here. This happens because he reads us and he quickly plays it to Sloboshai, and then Sloboshai collects it and turns and feeds upfield, and he feeds a very good ball to Luis Diaz. And I'm trying to think. Last year, this goal does not happen. Fabinho probably doesn't have the control. It probably doesn't look to play this pass, to someone like Sloboslai, or in this case, it would have been Henderson. And Henderson boots this. He doesn't find Luis Diaz's feet as quick as possible, as quick as this move was. And then from here, Luis Diaz has a terrific turn to shield the ball from the defender. I mentioned him yesterday. Yeah, there's some criticism here. He's incredible, actually, for this goal. This turn is everything. If he turns the opposite way, he loses the ball. So this turn fooled the defender, and that's where the goal came from. And then from there, he passes it to Nunes, and then Nunes picked out Elliott, and Elliott then dummies it for Salah. Salah probably told him to leave it. And this is a very good goal. And Dunk makes the poor pass, and takes it. But also Dunk makes a poor pass, but he also takes himself out of the play defensively because he runs after Luis Diaz, and Luis Diaz, but doing that little turn, he gets fooled by him, and that's taking him out of the play. And everyone here is forward minded and quick thinking here. It's just quick one touch football. It's a really good goal. And then Brighton get caught again, kind of playing from the back. And Sloboshai here is brought down. So Nunes is amazing here, and how quickly he closes down for Brighton. And he gets the keeper to freak. He plays a poor pass trying to find Pascal Gross, and Pascal Gross then has Sloboshai all over him. And then Gross basically brings Sloboshai down, and Nunes is the interesting thing is Nunes was maybe offsides, but Gross plays the ball back to him. So there's no issue there. And then Gross makes the offense. But the assist I think goes to Fabregas, who doesn't just clear the ball away when maybe he should have. It's the 43rd minute. You're so close to halftime. You don't need to keep every possession essentially. So a little mistake here by Fabregas. And Pascal Gross, brought Sloboshai, and there was talks maybe it should have been a red card. I didn't necessarily think that, but uh, the note I had was what Jeremy brought up. Brighton's been praised for playing the fullbacks really high and being brave on doing that, but here when your keeper is under pressure, it can bite you. especially when you don't have you kind of lost for you're outnumbered a little bit by a team like high pressing you. And then goals change games because around the 33rd minute mark, I was concerned how Liverpool were kind of struggling. They were struggling in midfield. They were struggling to get Elliott and Szoboszlai involved in the game. And it is funny how just goals did change the entire mood of it. And another thing that I was thinking about is I was just happy that it was a competitive game because Liverpool got thumped by Brighton in all 3 games last year. Even the one at Anfield, I think it was a desperate 3-3, where I think Trossard had a hat trick. But Brighton won the home fixture comfortably and then knocked Liverpool out of the FA Cup with basically Mitoma doing like a messy like goal at the very end. So I was just happy this was competitive, and then we see Elliott come off for Gravenberch, and then a big chance came for Brighton early in the second half. So it's a fantastic save by Allison to do this 1v1, which is his calling card. Allison just really good at bailing out when Liverpool do bad things defensively. But Brighton do well here to work this from a throw in. Ferguson gets on the ball. He finally has some space. It's like the one time when because Ferguson wasn't really getting involved a whole lot in that first half, but he finds some space here, and he has some time in the center of the field, and he sees a Dinker making a run past Andy Robinson, and Robinson is caught sleeping here, and yeah, Allison has to save him. Andy Robinson it does a good job to recover, but because he's sprinting so fast to get back, Adingra realizes this and does just a nice little chop back to cut past him, and yeah, that opened up the goal. That actually made it. That was a good play by Adingra because that gave his ankles a little bit better. But it also that gave Allison a little more time to get closer, and it's a strong glove by Allison, and yeah, that was just this was football. I mean, both teams are fighting like mad to keep the ball, but also to fighting like mad to win it back. So like both teams were pressing, and both teams didn't want to just boot it away. Both teams were trying to play through the press. And if a team lost the ball, you saw both teams kind of trying to find a way to immediately win it back. There wasn't a whole lot of hoofing. There wasn't aimless just giving it away. So a lot of chances didn't necessarily come from this. There weren't a lot of action with keepers making saves, but just this was quite entertaining. Jeremy kind of spoke on that yesterday. And then we have the big Liverpool chance, and this probably does kill the game off, and it is unfortunate because this was a very good move here. So Trent plays a long ball to Szoboszlai on the wing, and Szoboszlai then squares a pass to Nunez to kind of carry the ball upfield, and does a good job here. And he waits for Szoboszlai to then sprint ahead of him, and then he plays in between a pass between Marsh and Dunk, and Szoboszlai then crosses it kind of to the back post, and it's where Gravenberch is, and Gravenberch to touch is too high and hits the crossbar, and it's not the easiest chance, but Gravenberch is so close to the goal where anything less than what he does probably does go in. The ball does skip a little bit, so that makes it a little harder, but yeah, this probably should have gone in, and it definitely should have gone in because it was an amazing move. It was a really good team goal and well worked team goal, or should have been goal. Um, but I mentioned Trent having the ball over the top to find Szoboszlai, and Trent was weird in this game because he was turned into Liverpool 6 in possession. That was allowing McAllister to play maybe a little higher up. Like Jeremy mentioned, how there was that stretch in the second half where it felt like Liverpool maybe could have kind of gone away, gotten created a little bit of a gap, and won this game comfortably. And the positions that Trent was taking was better, or at least he was being more influential, I guess I could say. And Alexis McAllister was actually it felt like he was when he had someone near him, when he wasn't necessarily just asked to be the lone ball winner by himself, when he was able to kind of pick his moments. Uh, I think that was showing up as well. But also McAllister's is really good at getting the ball on the turn. He's not necessarily a ball winner, but when someone's kind of trying to press him, he doesn't really turn the ball over that much. I mean, sometimes he can, but he's fantastic at scanning. I think that's kind of the word for it when you're always kind of looking ahead before the ball actually comes to you, so you understand your surroundings. And normally he's good at finding a way to kind of thread a little forward 6-8 yard pass just upfield instead of just going side. This is something that Declan Rice doesn't do, in my opinion. So we saw McAllister doing that a little bit more, and again, being able to play through both the middle and out wide. That's what makes the team dangerous. Brighton were able to do this as well because Carlos Balba was doing this as well. So here, Alexis actually fools Balba. So again, it's a good spell by Liverpool. So he has a nice little clever turn, and then Gravenberch is making clever runs into the box, and they were really good passing moves by Sloboshai and Nunes, and Salah in the final third. Nunes didn't necessarily get a chance to necessarily score, but he was fantastic with the ball at his feet. It's worth praising him for that. And then there was a really good chance for Matoma. Matoma started to actually really come alive in the second half. So it's a near hand ball on Van Dijk, but I'm glad they didn't call this because I would have been really upset about that. The ball hits his lower body first, so I don't really think there's much he can do here. And then there's a chance for Matoma where Brighton nearly play him over the top, and it's amazing defensive play by Trent because this is probably a goal if Trent doesn't make this play. He's able to stretch and he's able to stop this ball from getting over the top, and then there was a chance for Luis Diaz, and it's a good chance. He gets it's a shot over the goal, and again Trent and McAllister are starting to thread passes through lines, and they were creating chances. They were finding a little freedom in that second half. The game was cagey a little bit in the first half. It was a little bit more open in the second half, and it was because of moments like this. And then uh, while the time when Liverpool actually had the dominant of the play, Brighton get the second goal. So funny how that works, and it did feel coming a little bit. They were dangerous just anytime they Brighton had a set piece. The reason why I say that is, here Robinson, no, there's a Brighton have made a couple subs, and I think Klopp has made a couple subs. He took off Trent Alexander-Arnold, brought on Joe Gomez. That maybe did actually change the game. That probably was what lost it. Because Gomez kind of screwed up a little bit after he came on, and Kanate got fooled by Sully Marsh. So Matoma and Marsh had started to be a little bit more involved in the final third, and Marsh basically drew the free kick, and then it was a really good ball sent in, and it's a good ball sent in, but also Andy Robinson misses this. And then Dunk just kind of, it falls through his lap and he finishes it. Um, and then there was another free kick for Brighton, kind of towards the end, where it looked like Matoma was really starting to cause some problems, and this could have been a disaster as well. And then the big chance came for Brighton, and so I mentioned the Gravenberch chance was pretty bad. Brighton had kind of a similar chance. I mean, it's a massive chance for Yao Pedro, blows it over, and yeah, I do think this kind of evened it out. Adingra schools Joe Gomez, who's playing on the other side of the field after a repossession, and he sends the ball, and it just deflects off Van Dyke, and it falls so kindly to Pedro. He's like 8 yards from goal, and there's no one near him, and he just can't keep his shot down. So a draw to me felt fair. Um, Brighton had the better moments actually after the 78th minute and on. Liverpool, I thought, had the better half in the second half until maybe that 78-minute mark, and then I thought Liverpool actually did play better in extra time, just there wasn't enough extra time. So the thing I mentioned, yesterday is it kind of felt some of both team from the Arsenal and City game. So both teams copied what they wanted to do, where a lot of the game was when the keeper had the ball, and both 3 goals came from mistakes from playing from the back. But I think the thing that did separate it was both teams were also willing to take risks. Both teams were willing to commit numbers higher up. And both teams had the ability to play through the middle and out wide. So yeah, it was pretty enjoyable. 14 shots apiece. Brighton only 3 shots on target. Liverpool 4. They actually it was two apiece. So that makes sense. Brighton 355, 85%. Liverpool with 433. 87% with passing. So Liverpool were able to prevent Brighton from being able to pass a lot. Jeremy mentioned a very interesting thing yesterday, which I think is spot on. Sometimes Brighton play almost like a 4-4-2. Essentially, it's not really a 4-2-3-1 because that kind of cam is really a second striker. And then sometimes when you only have two in midfield, sometimes you can get outnumbered a little bit. And I think that was kind of that. I think that was happening here. And so Liverpool had 3 in that central midfield, and also the way they kind of play with the high line. Sometimes it's more than that, and it felt like Brighton were a little outnumbered sometimes in midfield, just a little bit. And so you do that because the way you like so Ferguson likes coming dropping for the ball. It's maybe harder to mark those 2 attackers, but sometimes when you can't necessarily get that service to both of them, you can see the struggle when we saw what we saw worked really well with Man United was when Adam Lallana was played as that cam, who is a more of a midfielder than necessarily a second striker. And maybe they have been missing Adam Lallana since his injury, but that said, you can't necessarily rely on him that much because he's never really always fit. So I mean, maybe the idea could have been you could have tried Pascal Gross in a more of a attacking minded midfield area than necessarily as a pivot. Maybe you could find a way to play Dahoud or Pilly Gross. Maybe you could find a way to kind of do that. But that's just kind of picking at straws with Liverpool. Just I mentioned it yesterday. Trent, what a performance, and Slobosai as well. The work rate is amazing, and again, it's just I love Alexis McAllister. I really do. I just don't necessarily think him playing in this kind of defensive midfielder kind of role deeper. It's not necessarily the best way to get the best out of him. I don't really feel like he's a ball winner, and we saw yesterday. If people saw the highlights from the Argentina game, he can be a difference maker in the final third. And I would like him to maybe find a way to just play a little bit higher, but you can't necessarily do that because I don't know. The only other DM is Enzo, so it's just going to be kind of a wait and see kind of moment. It seems like Klopp doesn't really care about having a DM. He just wants to have, someone there. Maybe it can be kind of positionless football, essentially. So maybe sometimes it can be Sloboshai, sometimes it can be Alexa, sometimes it can be Gravenberch. Maybe that's kind of thinking that the Klopp has, or sometimes it could be Trent. Maybe that's the idea to do that is if you have positionless play like that, one it requires a lot of technical skill for teams to be able to play with different positions, but two, it makes you impossible to man mark. So I think that's maybe the thinking that Klopp has going into this. But sometimes when you have someone that's playing there that can't win the ball back, that can some teams can run past you, that can't have that space. You can be vulnerable. And another thing that's worth saying is the back line of health is going to be tested now because something that happened yesterday in the Scotland game is Andy Robinson, I think, dislocated his shoulder. So you're going to play with Samikis now. So you may be down. I don't think Samikis can play as a fullback, but I don't think Samikis can do the thing that Klopp was asking Andy Robinson to do, to almost play as a third center back at times. That 3-2 kind of 5 shape. And or the 3-2-2-3 kind of shape. So I don't necessarily know what Liverpool are going to be. You could maybe play Joe Gomez um, as that kind of left back role. We've seen him at right back. Maybe he could try it at left back. But that could be a bit of a miss. I've been a little bit on Andy Robinson's case, so I kind of shame on me. But I do think his loss could be big. To be honest. But that said, Liverpool are in a pretty good shape. Better shape than I maybe would have expected. And they have a really good schedule coming here, leading up to that November or December game versus Man City. They have a number of relatively favorable fixtures, but games aren't won on paper, so we'll see. Um, and they also, they missed Jota and Gakpo. Jeremy mentioned Jota yesterday. I think they get Gakpo back after maybe the international break, so his miss is going to be that long. So that could be a good to see as well. And then with Brighton with Carlos Balba is worth highlighting. And we mentioned him yesterday, and I think the main thing is they've conceded 16 goals in the league. They're having issues a little bit defensively. I just don't think it, it's hard to play when you have slow center backs essentially, and maybe Hugo Julio has a little bit better pace to him, but Julio had to go off in the second half. The games that Brighton have played with Adam Webster, they've just conceded goals left and right. That Webster and Dunk pairing doesn't really work out, and maybe Van Hecke and Dunk is a little bit better, and we saw them in the game that way. So maybe that's kind of the way to go forward. But I think the center backs are a little bit of an issue for them. And also, mentioned it last week. It's kind of crazy how he keeps changing the keeper. And Van Hecke made a mistake in this game. It's worth kind of saying that. And then I'll move on to West Ham and Newcastle. And Thomas Tuchel gets the first goal, and then Ishak gets two, and then Kudus at the very end. And Newcastle off their flying hammering of PSG in the Champions League, something I kind of really wasn't expecting, but maybe I should have. And then West Ham had a good week in Europe as well. So how would both teams going to bounce back? Newcastle, though, no Sven Botman. And the crazy thing is they had Jamal Lascelles versus PSG, and it didn't actually hurt them that much. Also, I figured maybe PSG could go with Dan Burn, and no, Dan Burn actually ended up scoring. Funny enough, and then so there was no Anthony Gordon and no Harvey Barnes. So Gordon was only suspended for yellow, so that's not necessarily an injury thing. So we saw Elliot Anderson kind of play it a little higher up, and that didn't necessarily work out. But this game was a little different. So I mean, the first goal, Newcastle came alive in the second half, but they struggled in the first half. There was a little bit of a hangover from the PSG win, I think. But so the first goal comes to Thomas Suchek. This is a well worked goal by West Ham, is worth saying. So Fabian Schär of Newcastle has the ball. He tries to send a long ball to Elliot Anderson. He overhits it. The ball falls into the keeper's hands, so that you lose possession here. And then a long ball to a guard finds Antonio sizing up Lascelles, and Antonio does a good job to hold on to it, and it goes backwards, passes to Paqueta, and Paqueta sees Emerson making a run ahead, and Paqueta plays a nice loop ball over the top that Emerson's able to run onto, and then so Newcastle are late to react. Pope then comes out trying to come out, but he makes a mistake maybe. Emerson's touch is fantastic. It takes him past Pope. I think he's surprised by that, and then from there he's able to pick out Souček for the tap in into the empty net. So the pass and vision by Paqueta is elite, to be honest. The run and touch by Emerson is equally so. And this goal doesn't happen without Souček being in the advanced role that he was. You know, when you have Antonio out of the picture, that's your striker, and it's important to just sometimes you just need someone to be in the box to be an option. It doesn't have to be necessarily a striker. Though Souček is tall and has a striker build. And there you go. So it's happened, and Newcastle kind of undone a little bit here, and that partnership, Paqueta and Emerson, is working out pretty well for Moyes. And then we mentioned how I was a little bit peeved and confused with that happened with Man City. With Kovacic, and the same thing happened in this game. So Bruno gets an early yellow, and then a couple minutes later, Bruno fouls Souček, going to ground, catching him from behind again, and this one stops a counterattack. And this is this is kind of crazy. So again, the refs had no issues doing this versus Liverpool, and this could have they even sent two players off in that game. I don't necessarily have to harp on that again, but Bruno could have gotten sent off here in just the 18th minute. In the 28-minute end, Newcastle have struggled to create. Maybe the injuries to Gordon and Barnes are hurting them. And then they did have a chance here at the very end with Dan Burn. And I do feel like Dan Burn can be a liability with his pace, but he's a weapon with his size in the air. And you actually see that maybe for one of the goals. So here he gets a free kick, and Trippier sends a good ball in. And Dan Burn gets a good head to it. And it just barely misses the far post. Nothing happened though in the first half. West Ham one shot, Newcastle three shots. Newcastle, I thought we're lucky to have 11 players. Um, but it was also interesting because it was a different game than what Newcastle faced versus PSG. PSG want to have the ball and want to play through Newcastle, kind of high pressing them. West Ham don't. West Ham were fine, kind of sitting in a block, and it was just entirely different dynamic. And they were kind of struggling, especially when you allow West Ham to get that early goal. Then you're basically playing into their blocks, and it becomes a different game. And they struggled a little bit with that. But the thing that was interesting was the Newcastle shape changed a little bit in the second half. So I have almost a 3-3-4 essentially. So Trippier's come kind of deep a little bit. And then there's a line of four ahead with Elliott, Ishak, Tonali, and Almiron. And sometimes Tonali was dropping deep. That it wasn't always the same front four, but it always was a front four. And they always had three in midfield as well. Um, and then but there was a chance. There was maybe a chance for Paqueta to Bowen in the 54th minute. It's a really good example of how West Ham can play some nice stuff when they do get the time. So here Bowen gets the ball on the sideline. He plays it backwards to Paqueta, and then Bowen makes a diagonal run into from the sideline to get into the box. And Paqueta sees it and floats a ball into his way, and it's just cleared at the last minute by Fabian Schär. But otherwise, this probably is the second goal. And then on the ensuing corner kick, Alvarez had a free header that he probably should have done better. And then we have a chance for Dan Burn. Newcastle starting to maybe pin West Ham a little bit in. West Ham are getting the ball, they're winning it back, or Newcastle have the ball in their West Ham's end. West Ham are winning it back, and then all they're doing is just going along and giving possession away. And Newcastle able to recycle. It's happening over and over again at this point. So here, they find a way to break through with Ishak trying to float a hopeful ball into the back post that Dan Burn out jumps. Out jumps to fall and forces a good save by Ariola. And then the goal almost comes immediately following. So what happens here is West Ham try to counter, and it looks like Paqueta is maybe got the better of Tonali, and the ref blows the play dead for a foul, giving Newcastle a free kick. So this is West Ham have a little grievance here, in my opinion. So the ball is sent in by Trippier, and then as an Alvarez kind of freaks, and he gets caught, and unfortunately kind of heads the ball to Isaac. So and then Isaac has a really good control, and then finishes. But so it's maybe offsides. They looked at that, but they assumed Edson Alvarez is just heading it to him, so it's his touch. But I thought that they were unlucky too because I thought Tonali was fouled, not necessarily, or I thought maybe Paqueta was fouled, or if anything, it's 50-50 because Tonali is fouling Paqueta as well, and Paqueta had a chance to actually, if he gets through, if he gets past Tonali, West Ham are through. West Ham maybe have someone like Antonio in front of him making a run. You maybe have Bowen and you have Paqueta able to kind of just run at Newcastle's back line, probably running backwards. So this was a pretty big moment in the game, and then. So it goes Newcastle's way, and then they get the second goal with Ishak as well. Um, and it is kind of cruel a little bit too because Bruno could have been sent off, and it's his pass to Trippier that kind of undoes this. It's a wonderful pick out by Bruno Guimaraes. No one is marking Trippier though, and then Trippier just one times us into the 6 yard area where Ishak's able to tap it in. West Ham defenders seem Trippier's offsides and basically stopped playing. But another thing too is there's a sneaky push if you go back on replay that Ishak has on the back of Bellegarde, when Trippier is crossing it in, and it was surprising the VAR didn't necessarily look at that. So in the NFL, I think it's considered dark arts, and this was a little dark arty kind of play, and ended up kind of working out. And then yes, in the 78th minute, I have West Ham were second best, really all half, and then Moyes makes a couple changes. So he brings on Saeed Benrahma and Mohamed Kudus. And this is what won him in the game, essentially. So we get to the goal with Kudus. And a nice way to announce yourself. But one word to describe this guy to me is match winner. While he doesn't necessarily win them the game, he steals a point. But I just feel if Moyes could play him and trust him a little bit more this season, this won't be the only one, and he's got real star potential to me. I saw him a few times with Ajax in the Champions League last year. He stood out, and he's not a speed demon. He's not a one trick pony. He's got a lot of versatility to me in his game. He can play on either side of the wing. He can dribble past people. He's got clever flicks. He's inventive, creative. He's got a rocket for a shot on I think both feet. And Brighton were linked to him actually before West Ham, and I think Chelsea were as well. So West Ham have got themselves a baller, in my opinion. You see that for the goal. So Suchek here is played the ball in the wing. He's able to carry it upfield without Newcastle being able to really get any bodies on him. And here he sees Kudus, holding on to his run. Kudus doesn't, just immediately sprint to get into a box. He sees that actually, there's enough numbers in the box that they're cluttered. Why don't I hold off a little bit? And Sufal gets it. So Sufal is able to draw, I think, Bruno Guimaraes to go onto him. And he's able to play in Kudus, and he collects it near the top of the box. And one touch to collect, two touch to fire, and it's a great hit, maybe with his weak foot, to go past Pope. And then West Ham nearly win it, where Bowen and Benrahma, and again Kudus is involved. He gets it and turns and finds Bowen. Bowen cuts inside to try to beat Pope, and the shot is going wide, but I think it's almost a nearly perfect cross because Benrahma just kind of somehow misses getting a touch here, for almost a tap in. But it was a Dan Burn moment, because when Bowen was able to cut in, Dan Burn got beat. So I was surprised Bowen. We didn't see Bowen versus Dan Burn a little bit more. I don't want to necessarily harp on that, but I do feel like if I was targeting Newcastle, that probably would be something I would look at. Just Dan Burn just doesn't have the pace for say a really quick, clever kind of wing or 1v1, in my opinion. Maybe I could be wrong. But yeah, both teams were flying in Europe, and this was a pretty even game. So that was kind of fun to see. The the thing that's surprising to me is just West Ham when you look at stats, they only have every single game. They only have 220-ish passings and 35% of possession. And you look at who they have now. You have Paqueta, you have Edson Alvarez. To me, is a better passer than I don't want to necessarily Declan Rice, but he's a good You see, he's got 90-ish% completion every single game. To me, James Ward-Prowse is a better passer than what they had last year, and James Ward-Prowse doesn't really necessarily lose the ball. So I feel like they have a midfield that they could keep the ball a little bit better. So I am a little surprised about that. Newcastle actually, though, have changed it around. A couple games in a row, they've had 500 passes, 500 plus passes with 86% accuracy. I like this Tonali, Bruno, and Longstaff midfield. I think it gives them a little bit more balance than what we are seeing maybe with Joe Linton, that was tried earlier in the season. I really do like it, and Uh, whether we see it work in the Champions League, whether we see if the PSG was just a one-off or not, this Newcastle team is flying a little bit, and wow, with what they were able to do with PSG. Though PSG, went in maybe being a little naive. They kind of went in playing with four attackers, thinking that they could just kind of match Newcastle's back line with PSG's back line, and they figured PSG's four attackers would be able to handle. Newcastle's back line. Newcastle were playing like Jamal Shells, and there were a couple of times where PSG did have Dembele free, getting the better of Dan Burn, and Dembele just wasn't able to make any of it count. Newcastle were able to take Mbappe out of the game. It is worth saying that. And then PSG had undid themselves a little bit. They their first goal came from Donnarumma having a mistake, and Newcastle win it high up the pitch, and it's kind of an easy kind of way for Almiron to score, and then it might even be a corner kick or some kind of a cross sent in that Dan Burn is able to just kind of win a header. So that's how start off by being down 2 goals. So that changes the game entirely. And then you get that stadium rocking. So there could be some instances why that game maybe shouldn't have been what it was. But yeah, you can't necessarily do that. So we'll see how Newcastle do at the fixture, because Newcastle did not necessarily look like this versus AC Milan. They were the team under the cosh. They were the team that needed Nick Pope to save them, like make 8 saves. So yeah, I still don't necessarily know what to think of Newcastle. But here, good job for them to get the win, and Ishak's on a bit of a flyer, to be honest. Going back to last season, he's been and he gets two good goals here. It seems sometimes they don't necessarily know how to necessarily find him. Sometimes it feels like maybe Callum Wilson is a better finisher. I would like to find a way to see them try to play together. At some points, you don't necessarily have to do it for the full game, just kind of in a second half, kind of thing. And I do think maybe in this game they did miss maybe Anthony Gordon or kind of a Barnes. They were trying Elliot Anderson, who seems to be more of a midfielder than necessarily someone that's going to make a run in behind or beat someone 1v1. And with West Ham, Mo Kudus. Why not speak about him a little bit more? I think he needs to play more. I mean, Samet Soucek has scored the last couple of games in this kind of role, and it is worth saying it seems like Moyes likes players that do a little bit more stuff without the ball than with it. So maybe that's going to take some time for someone like Kudus to get used to. I don't necessarily know what he was like at Ajax, but someone that probably likes seeing the ball a lot probably doesn't necessarily like doing a lot of defensive stuff without it. So that could maybe be the reason why he's taking a little while to get going. Uh, he is starting in the Europa games, and they've been playing well in Europa. And maybe that's not the worst thing for him. It can find a way. You can find a way to get him settled, get him some playing time, get him used to the style. Why not? And then bringing him on in the second half. But he looked good. He's looked good when he's come on. He looked good for Man City, in my opinion. And he had 4 for 4 dribbling last week for Sheffield, and difference maker in this game. And then, Paqueta and Emerson, that little partnership is working out pretty well. And just the issue is, I just don't feel like they can keep the ball enough. They're the third worst passing side in the league. And yeah, it just it is kind of funny because David Moyes and West Ham, their blueprint is to sit in blocks and play off the counter, and maybe go long. And again, they just that was entirely different than what Newcastle were used to with PSG. And it was worth interesting too. In that second half, before that fourth goal happened, I thought they were still somewhat in this game, and when Vitinha and Barcolo came on, so that second fixture could be a little bit more competitive. I guess I'll put it that way. I'm not. I saw people on Talksport saying Newcastle is going to win the Champions League before PSG. Maybe that could be true, but I think that could be still a competitive contest. Uh, and then we'll move on to Chelsea and Burnley. We'll see how we're doing for time, which is probably terrible. It could be worse. It could be better. So Burnley get the first goal. So I was talking up Chelsea and they yesterday. Burnley get the first goal with Odegaard, And then just kind of they fell apart with Sterling. Sterling decided to just take over the game, so Sterling forces an own goal, and then Sterling gets taken down, draws the PK. Cole Palmer makes the PK, and then Sterling gets the third goal, and then they basically killed the game off. And then Jackson was able to get the fourth, and Sterling also forced that one. And I mean, the interesting thing with Burnley is, it looked like Company made a couple changes just because of, legs were tired, so we saw no Koleosho. Wilson Odebear, got his debut start, and he was good. We also saw Lyle Foster back, so I think that was good for them. And we instead of seeing, like, Connor Roberts, we saw Vitinho, start, for that, kind of right fullback. That did not work out. As we'll get to. I mean, the early chance was right there, right in front of him. 14th minute, early warning sign, and I do like the shape here of Chelsea, to be honest. So Gallagher gets the ball forward. He finds Cole Palmer in a pocket of space centrally, and then he plays it to Sterling on the left side of the field. But there's still Broja in the box. So if Sterling wants to cross something in, there's still an option there. I think Cole Palmer also continues his run and runs in behind Sterling too to be an option. But here Sterling decides to cut inside and take the chance himself, and he tries a curler and he tries it from distance, and it doesn't miss by much. But it's the first of many times he gets the better of Vitinho. And then I have there was a chance for Burnley with Tresser. Odegaard, and it is kind of caused by Odegaard. So here he does well to kind of freeze Mark Cucurella and then floats the ball into the back post where Tressar makes a good run, and Tressar just gets us really, really wrong. And then did I get to the goal? Oh, I missed the early goal. So oh well. So what happened? I guess there for the first goal that Burnley scored. Uh, Lau Foster got the ball into the box and did a decent job to find Odegaard kind of out wide, or got the ball into the box and forced Chelsea kind of closed down on him, and then he was able to find Odegaard, and Odegaard was able to just kind of pass it in. So I kind of screwed up there. And then so we have Chelsea getting the tying goal, and it is an Aldekiel own goal, and this is really unfortunate. But Burnley, for the most part, had kept Chelsea quiet at this point. But here Sterling does really well to just kind of get the cross off, and he's being tightly marked by two guys, so he does well to just kind of beat them and to get the cross off and just deflects off Aldekiel. Um, in the second half, it was interesting to see Broja subbed off for Jackson. Broja just had 15 touches and wasn't really working out. But really, the game changed here on the PK. So Burnley are making a mess of things at the back. They started off horribly in the second half. They get lucky a few times, but the third one burns them. And so here, Casado jumps on a loose pass. Casado was very, very good in this game. So he was winning the ball back, and I think he had something like a 97% pass accuracy. So here, he jumps on the pass, and then Sterling gets the ball on the sideline and basically just decides to sprint to the byline. It gets into the penalty area, and there where he's brought down, and then Cole Palmer, makes the save. And then there was a chance for Odegaard again. He gets the shot and he forces Sanchez to make a save. He had a good game. And then we get to the third goal, and here Burnley is still in the game at this point, but this kills it off. And again, Casado anticipates Ramsey receiving a pass from the sideline. He figures it's going to be hard to control with a first touch, and Casado recognizes it, wins the ball off him, and then from there Chelsea break. And Gallagher then plays a very nice through ball for Sterling. I like Gallagher playing higher up. I like this position for him. Um, and Sterling is able to finish it. And I like how another thing that was funny here is it looked like it was offside, and VAR did decide to check it, but they also restarted the play. So they did do the goal kick, and then they're like, "Hold off, we're going to check the offside." So it's very interesting how a week ago they couldn't do this for Liverpool. They couldn't postpone. They couldn't stop the game after it had restarted because protocol or whatnot, and they did it here. So not to say I was annoyed by that, but I was. Um, but on the goal, I liked what Gallagher did here. I like him higher up, and it's a very good through ball for him to feed Sterling in, and yeah, he screwed up where he finished where he screwed up for Aston Villa, and then we get to the fourth goal with Jackson, and again Sterling's at the heart of this as well, and Dario O'Shea is tight on him, and he tries to get too tight, and he gets spun, and then from there Sterling's able to sprint with the ball all the in open grass, up the wing, ball is crossed in, and he finds Cole Palmer, and then Palmer finds Jackson in the box, and Jackson has a really nice touch here. He kind of does a move to drag the ball behind him, and then he puts it away. Uh, the so it was interesting. This was a different front line than we had seen from Chelsea. We'd seeing Mudryk, we'd been seeing Sterling try it on the right side. Mudryk, I guess, is dealing with a little muscle tightness or some kind of injury. So we finally saw Sterling on the left, and we saw Cole Palmer not just played kind of in a central role, kind of played on the right, and they the balance in this game was quite good. I mean, Chelsea did only have 9 shots, but 5 on target. But the main thing was just that they dictated the game with their passing, 613, 92% accuracy. It's a lot different, obviously, when you can score and do this. But Chelsea has been doing this pretty much every game other than the Fulham one. And yeah, maybe it could have been better, but they just Burnley were outclassed. Some of it was their own doing, but Chelsea were quite good again. And it's good to get Nicholas Jackson to score, get his confidence. It's a really good touch he has. I think that's been a little bit of the. It's not just the finishing. Sometimes he's gotten the ball, or sometimes he's made a really good run. The Chelsea have tried to find him, and his touch has kind of let him down. He has a really good touch for the goal here. But it is just one game, but it is funny how what scoring a couple goals can do for a team's perspective. But there is a lot of shoulder on a lot of load for Jackson and Broja to carry this attack. But that said, I think you only need a 20 goal scoring striker to challenge for a title, to challenge for a league. You can maybe get by having a good enough midfield that keeps enough of the ball to scrape by and get fourth. And they could also so they get Nkuku back in December. They could go and get Tony maybe in January. So there's still a lot of reasons for Chelsea fans to be a little bit more optimistic, in my opinion. Now, again, maybe kind of I'm hoping I'm eating my words because I don't want that to happen. And as Jeremy said yesterday, the schedule for them it sucks. But it is interesting to see. There've been a couple changes though. Maybe the reason why they've been better is so they lost Malo Gusto on that red card, and since then Mark Cucurella has come in and played on the right, not necessarily at left, and he's been important for them. He had 110 touches and 90% pass accuracy in this game. Sterling played a role in basically all 4 goals, and he played a different position as well. Cole Palmer is starting to shine for them. It took a while for him to actually just kind of get into the starting lineup, and so how much of this can be repeated, we'll have to see. But if I look at if I look at Chelsea's midfield right now with Enzo, Gallagher, and Caicedo versus what Arsenal have, I kind of do think Chelsea might have the better midfield. That could age entirely horrible. We'll have to see. Arsenal are going to feel like they have the world on their shoulders after that City win. Maybe they just find some superpower, and that sometimes that turns out to be terrible. But we'll have to see. And then I'll move on to Tottenham and Luton Town. And the highlight was Basuma getting 2 yellows kind of early. And it's funny how they did finally send someone off here. But it doesn't matter. And Luton Town have the man advantage and still allow someone to concede on them like they did the week before with Wolves with Mickey Van de Ven, the defender. And it's fitting that Van de Ven scores because I'm going to spend a little time talking about both him and Romero for what they did defensively. So it's perfect for me to remember to talk about that. And it's a good goal that he scores as well. But Madison has a big role in that as well. I mean, it's the same lineup that Pochettino, that Agni or Ange. I need to actually think of what his name is. That Tottenham played versus Liverpool. So no different there. But Luton Town did change it up. Luton Town had been playing almost a 3-5-2 kind of shape. Sometimes they'd gone with maybe a 3-4-3, but they'd always been doing a back three. Here they did a 4-4-2, and this did not work. Kabare was also benched for the first game. I was surprised about that. And again, this really did not work. I mean, Spurs started off, and they could have had 3 goals after the first like 8 minutes. I mean, there's a chance here in the third minute. Kulishevsky has a great cross to the back post that Richarlison somehow messes up the tap in. He kind of did something similar to what that Gravenberch had. It's not necessarily that bad, but it is. He does mess up here, and it is a tap in. And Richarlison is way too open here. Where is the fullback? Where is the kind of the cover? But there is a really nice movement though. It's Romero to Sarr to Porro to Madison, and then Kulishevsky all with like one touch passing. They just pass through, like they're not even there. And then a couple minutes later, Richarlison forces a save. So at least Richarlison does better to force a save. Um, Basuma wins the ball back, and Spurs move the ball from the right side of the field to the left, and then Madison gets the ball into the middle and plays in Richarlison, who again is left on mark down the left side, and then Richarlison this time it gets the effort on goal, but it is saved by Kaminsky getting to the ground in time, and then just a couple minutes later, in the 7th minute, it's Pedro Porro. This time the shot goes wide. He could do better on the shot, but this is really good by Spurs. I mean, it's too easy, so you can go at Luttentown a little bit, but they were able to just pick their heads up and pass the ball into the net, and it starts with a very good upfield pass by Mickey Van de Ven. He finds Son, and then Son turns. Touches it to Porro. Porro passes it back to Son, and then Son gets it for a give and go and plays in Pedro Porro, making a run behind everyone. No one decides to mark Pedro Porro, making that little late disguised run. It's way too easy. Porro is in on goal, and he just misses the effort wide. And then, in the 27th minute, there was a chance for Kulishevsky. He forces a really good save by Kaminsky. Kaminsky was actually having a pretty good game. And Sarr just kind of picked the ball off, and then Kulishevsky had the shot saved. The Letton Town strategy I had was crazy. It was they were not marking anyone, at least in the beginning, but they were doing somewhat well to prevent Bissouma and I thought Madison getting a lot of touches on the ball. So they figured they could maybe kind of do that, and what that ended up doing is the responsibility on ball progression shifted to Van de Ven, to Christian Romero and to Pedro Porro and Udogi, the fullbacks. And maybe a different Spurs team would not have been able to do this if like a Ben Davies, if Oliver Skip, if other players, I don't necessarily Royal, but whoever they Spurs had last year, for their defensive players, uh, yeah, Dave Davidson Sanchez, those kind of players, I don't think they would have been able to do that. Because Spurs were able to just still play through Luton Town like they weren't even there without really Madison and Basuma, and really Sarr having a whole lot of influence, and that's where the way that he's able to Ange is able to play the fullbacks almost different than other teams. A lot of fullbacks usually kind of their option or their role is to keep width, to go wide, maybe even plays wingbacks. They're almost as they're in midfield all the time, and you're actually seeing maybe Van de Ven's role out of possession when that happens is to actually shift a little wide. Same with Romero. And again, the shape is hard to kind of really pin down, and it was hard for Lettentown to pin down. But that said, it did finally around like the 30th minute, the chances and the onslaught that Spurs had finally stopped, and then the two yellows came for Basuma, and the second one comes from him trying to buy a free kick by diving. But I will say the first yellow is a good yellow by Basuma. So Pedro Porro loses possession. Van de Ven is not even with Romero, and Carlton Morris is about to make a run, splitting them. A through ball is on, and Basuma recognizes that and immediately fouls the guy on the ball to prevent that pass from happening. So the first yellow was a really good play by Basuma. It's worth saying that. Uh, and then I guess before the second yellow got goal, Lutton did have a goal. They did see the ball go into the net. But there is this foul on Adebayo. I think it's the right call, but it is kind of close. I mean, Adebayo does well to I guess get onto the ball, and he loops it to towards the goal, and it kind of bounces off, and then Locklear is able to just throw his head at the ball, and he actually gets clobbered in by Udogi kicking him into the face. But there was a little shove, before that's the reason why Adebayo is able to get to this, and it's probably the right call. But yeah, and then so you get to halftime, it is 0-0, and Luton Town have the man advantage, so what are they gonna do with the extra man? And the answer was nothing. They did have some chances, so a big chance here, with, again, Adebayo, and, this was pretty bad. I mentioned the Gravenberch chance, there was a earlier chance with Charleston, this was worse. It's he's got to score this. So instead of sticking out his weak foot to just easily tap this in, he tries to extend his right foot out, and he gets us all wrong. So Ogbeni does a really good job to finally he gets a ball played through to run onto. He gets the better of Sar here, and he's able to square a ball hard across the goal to the back post. And yeah, Adebayo has to at least get this on at least get somewhat contact on this to get it on goal. Because if it gets on goal, I think it's going in. And we'll get to the goal that Van de Ven scores, and it's brilliant by James Madison. It's similar to what he did versus Arsenal, and it's just a little 1v1 skill to beat a man, get to the byline, and then he picks out a teammate with a cutback ball, and it's a great finish by Van de Ven because it's not always easy to get the hips to turn around fast enough to get power on the shot the way with the technique that he uses to get this on the foot that he wants it on. Yeah, and there are also there are two ways that you can do this. So these can go two ways, I guess. When you're down a man, you want to push numbers forward, but anytime, when you get a free kick, this is like basically an equalizer. But any chance that Luton have a chance to maybe win the ball back and maybe a breakaway is on for them. And before this goal happened, Spurs had three corner kicks in a row, and Luton Town were not able to just defend any of them. And so that's the reason why they basically lose. That Adebayo miss looms large now. And then Luton Town did get a couple chances. There was a chance for Doughty. This is a pretty good chance too. He misfires from close. Decent ball in, and he has a chance to volley this into the net and just hits it wide. There's a chance for Carlton Morris. He does well to at least create the chance, but he cuts his angle off and it forces a save. And then the one by Jacob Brown was a free header, and he maybe should do better here. This is a good chance as well. So ball looped in, free header 8 yards away, and he sends it over the bar. And there was a chance here for the Woodrow that came on, and Morris does well to looks to have played Woodrow through on goal. And Woodrow's first touch is just so poor. It forces him to lose balance and pace, and he gets a shot away, but it's too weak. Spurs after that moment had complete control of the game. It was very interesting to see Kulishevsky his role in the second half, where it wasn't necessarily to take a player on, defend them. His role was really to get the ball and just kind of annoy Luton Town with possession. He didn't lose it. He was fantastic doing that, just being an outlet, not losing the ball, drawing fouls. He was really really good. And Spurs passed the game out after that Woodrow miss. So this was impressive. This was impressive for Spurs for a different reason than what we've seen. They were able to have a little adversity. It's probably not easy to also start the game off so well away, and you imagine, oh, this is going to be an easy game, and then you look at the 30th minute, and all those early chances have gone away. You still haven't scored. So that could have gotten into the psyche as well. And then you have the red card. You're playing down a man. And instead, they just absolutely bossed it. I mean, 15 shots and four on target. So they outshot Luton Town. Luton Town did have 9 shots in the second half of their 12. But Spurs 67% possession and 473 passes with 86% accuracy. Luton Town seemed to be a team that don't really know how to deal with a team that's defending deep. That even if they have an extra man, we saw the same thing versus Wolves, and that's why I feel like Luton Town they have some issues. I mean, they were able to create some chances. Maybe this game could have ended, 1-1, maybe even 2-1, but still, it doesn't feel like they have any kind of idea what to do with the ball. To be honest, other than hopeful crossing into a box. They are quite big. They're quite good on set pieces. It's worth saying that. But yeah, they're struggling every single game. It's here we have 170 passes. They're also upper man. That should be a lot higher, and only 67% accuracy. Um, yeah, with Tottenham, everyone we mentioned Madison all the time. I'm not necessarily going to do that. They aren't going to have Basuma versus Fulham. That could be something to watch. It might be Oliver Skip and Sar, so we'll have to see that. But I'm going to touch on the center back partnership of Van de Ven and Romero. Both were great on the ball, and the Van de Ven has really good close down speed, and that little that balance there is really really good. And again, if you're when you can handle maybe playing down a man if you have defenders that are good with the ball at their feet. Spurs have that now. Spurs have center backs and fullbacks that are some of the best in the league in possession, and they hit it out of the park last summer. Madison again. I just Manchester United, I guess, makes sense because they have Bruno. But how did Newcastle, even Man City, Chelsea, allow Spurs to get this guy? because everyone saw what he was doing at Leicester. But also, Udogie has come in, and he's not playing an easy fullback role, and he's been absolutely incredible, as has Van de Ven. And Van de Ven was a little bit on my radar last year. I knew he was up there for like one of the best recoveries in all of Europe when he was in the Bundesliga, and I did see him when I was watching a Dutch game with Van Dijk, but he got kind of someone got the better of him. So uh, it is kind of funny how Spurs have been able to recruit him, and what a signing he's been. And it's not just again, it's not just the goal. That partnership with him and Romero is such a good balance, and both look really good with the ball at their feet. And the note I had here was Harry Kane messed up. If you left to go trophy chasing, you would have had a chance to win something. I think with the Spurs team. Um, yeah, I was not expecting this. I didn't know how necessarily how Son was going to work out for them. It is funny because I praised Richarlison playing on the left side, versus Liverpool. Richarlison didn't necessarily have a bad game, so there are two ways to look at this because uh, how do you like the idea that he's getting into good spots and can't finish, or are you worried that the poor touches, the poor finishing, uh, is more a bigger issue than not. And they're the kind of two ways to look at that. But I don't know. He was hooked off at halftime. He was kind of the one that was sacrificed because of the red card. But before that, he honestly could have had two goals, maybe even an assist. After the first 30 minutes, so just maybe one of those days, just a little unlucky. But another thing that's worth saying is so the Basuma and Sar midfield partnership has been really good to start the season, and they aren't far away from getting Betancourt back to add to this little midfield duo, or maybe even a trio. And it'll be interesting to see how he recovers. But before he was taken out, before he had that ACL injury, he was one of the best midfielders in the league. It's worth saying that, and everyone kind of assumed that once he went out, Spurs were really going to struggle, and they did. Spurs were not that far away from being a top four kind of contender last season, and then they lost Betancourt, I think, in February. And so Spurs only have 1 week football. They're going to be able to maybe keep Madison healthy, going to be able to keep Son healthy, and they're going to have some midfield depth. So I do think that this isn't just going to be a purple patch. I think this can continue. That could age horribly, but I don't know. With Luton Town, I don't think this will age horribly. I think they're struggling, and they're going to continue to struggle. I get a club has financial constraints, but they don't seem to have passing patterns at all. It's the worst passing team in the league, and no, it's basically them, Sheffield, and West Ham, which is a surprise to see West Ham. But yeah, because they can't really keep the ball. I don't see how they're going to be able to stay up. But I could be wrong. We'll have to see. It does take some time for teams to adapt to a different league. It could be we could be seeing some of that as well. And then I'll move on to Everton and Bournemouth. And the thing we mentioned yesterday was uh, I kind of feel like maybe we could see Ariola as the first manager to go because this game probably should be more competitive than it was. And man, did Bournemouth go into this and get hammered by basically their own doing. Everton were good; they were not this good, in my opinion. Bournemouth, which is kind of played into a little bit of a trap. So, I mean, the first goal with Garner. It's very good pressing by Toure, but it's only him. He's just running at three different players, and he makes Zabineri kind of slip. Zabineri just it's unfortunate that he slips, but he does. And then from there, Everton have the breakaway, and Garner has options. He has options to either try to Corey, try maybe Calvert Lewin, and he decides to go it alone, and passes it into the net. So but the thing I noticed here is the gap between the center backs and the midfield for Bournemouth is like 30 yards, and I'm not exaggerating. I don't understand. There's not a single midfield player, almost even in the camera view, when Sabinieri is getting pressured. And I don't know if it's miscommunication. Clearly, someone was expecting them to go long, and Bournemouth didn't want to go long. And then Decore just was able to just press them into a mistake by himself. It's not like it's only him that's running after people. And then we get the second goal with Harrison, and what a goal! But this also could have been prevented. Everton have like 3 corner kicks in a row, and then, on the third, it's what gets them. Harrison gets on the rebound and sends in a kind of a weak ball into the box. Neto can only punch it away, and then Mikalenko gets on the ball and also sends a ball into the box, and Neto again tries to punch this away, and he whiffs. And I think there's bad communication between him and the center back, and then so Neto's out of position, and then Harrison gets the ball, I guess, 20 yards, 28 yards away, and he volleys it into the net, and, it's incredible technique. This is not an easy finish for someone, so it's very good by Harrison. I think it's his first start, and Harrison, maybe, offered them, some pretty good balance that, I liked what I saw, from Everton, where they were a little bit better on the ball with Harrison and McNeil, as wing options, and we finally saw James Garner played a little bit more centrally. And I did feel like they Everton had a bit more of an idea of what they wanted to do. It wasn't necessarily just kind of hit and hope, like they have sometimes been. Eh, I I don't necessarily know if we'll always see that. Sometimes it's usually Gaye that's kind of played there with, but Onana did a decent job, I thought, defending, and you're allowing Decore to almost have almost like a free role. He's like a second striker, but he's also like 6'3", 6'4", and with Calvert Lewin's got some size to him too. You've got options, and Jack Harrison has good delivery on him. McNeil has some good delivery on him. You can see now a way for Everton to play and play consistently, and with someone like James Garner who can. Maybe thread a couple passes up the middle, you can see, maybe a different side, to Everton. That's what Jeremy was trying to get at, yesterday. So I can maybe see where he's coming from. And then here, so I mean, halftime thought it was just a 2-0 game, and then, there's a chance early on where, basically Bournemouth get caught on the ball, and Calvert-Lewin basically forces a mistake. So it's just a single player again. And Decore is 1v1. He probably should do better here. He can't beat the keeper, but, it doesn't matter because Decore is able to get his reward, just a couple minutes later. And, Onana is maybe lucky to get away with kind of a foul. He shoves a player off the ball, but from there, Everton have numbers near the penalty area. Onana plays in Dwight McNeil, and Dwight McNeil makes a run to the byline and then sends a really good ball, to the back post where Harrison is. Harrison has a header, and, it's saved by Neto, but the rebound falls to Decore, and he hammers it home. The ball is bouncing awkwardly, and not necessarily the easiest finish to make, but he does. And that pretty much is it. I mean, Everton didn't need this. I think Dyche needed this. I think Calvert Lewin needed this. He didn't score, but this is probably his best game that he's looked in over almost a calendar year. Calvert Lewin has looking better. It looks like he maybe trusts his body a little bit more. He was good. I mean, 25 shots and 8 on target. Bournemouth 11 and 4. Bournemouth did have more of the ball. Everton, 300 passes. Everton's XG was 2.4. Bournemouth was 0.69. And again, with Everton, they kind of pressed. I have them pressing at Bournemouth into mistakes, but I don't necessarily know if it wasn't like team pressing. It was just like one or two. It was Calvin Lewin or kind of a, Decore. You can't necessarily press high because Everton don't really have that back line that can play high. Um, and Decore has come in, and he was very good versus Brentford last week. I thought Decore was quite good versus Luton Town. Everton were honestly unlucky to lose to Luton Town. It is worth saying that. Um, but I did like the shape. I thought this was better, than we had seen, and I liked Garner through the middle. And with Bournemouth, the shape, everything I liked about Everton. I guess there's a opposite reaction here. The shape was off for Bournemouth. The first goal, again, I don't understand why there's such a giant gap between the back line and midfield. The midfield has been really kind of a theme, unfortunately, all season, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get better. Alex Scott is not necessarily fit for games. That looks like Tyler Adams has a setback and won't be available till like December. I mentioned it yesterday. They messed up getting rid of Jefferson Loomer, and I feel like Rothwell needs to play necessarily over Christie and Cook, and even Billing. They don't have a balance at all, to me. And I was a bit surprised we didn't see, with Everton somewhat pressing high. Why not try the back line? Why not test Mikalenko with balls over the top for Watatara to run onto? They were just poor, and a Bournemouth fans are probably a little worried here, and I can understand why. You look at Bournemouth. I mentioned they were front loaded yesterday, and what I mean by that is you look at their roster sheet. and there's Tavernier, there's Clivert, there's Watatar, there's now Sinistera, and you'd think all of them are kind of the same type of player. They have a lot of like kind of forward attacking options. You don't really see a whole lot of who can someone that can control a game, who can someone that can keep possession, someone that can find feet. You don't really see a lot of like those kind of midfielders. You don't see a whole lot of that. So yeah, I do think they're gonna struggle a little bit. And then we'll get to Fulham and Sheffield. And Fulham kind of thumped Sheffield, and Sheffield had wanted to know where they are in the pecking order. Fulham, I think I saw a lot of people feel like Fulham could maybe kind of struggle a little bit this season, and if that's the case, then Sheffield are definitely going to do so. The interesting about Fulham though is they've started to turn things around a little bit, and I think it started with Paulinho being back into the squad, and you look and we saw Iwobi now played, got a start, played in midfield. We saw a little bit of a better balance, I think, in midfield with Paulinho, Iwobi and Pereira, and we saw Bobby Reed get a start and Vinicius get a start. And then the star of the thing was William, which is I don't know how he does it. He's like 35, 36 years old. He could be 26 the way he's running. It's very impressive. And then with Sheffield, we saw Austin Trusty get a debut, and it was interesting to see James McAtee on the bench. And I feel like I feel like there's a reason for that for what we saw versus West Ham. But there's an early chance here for Bobby Reed. It's a decent cross sent in by Anthony Robinson. We're just kind of saying that. He gets behind everyone and sends a good cross in, and Reed is there, just kind of messes up the touch, but he gets better touch later in the game. And then there's a chance for William. This is very good, and it's a sign of better things to come later. Vinicius is holding onto the ball and plays in William, making a run into the Sheffield penalty area, and while sprinting, William has a perfect touch to get past the defender. And then, kind of in the same stride, he allows himself to get a good shot away and without losing any kind of pace or balance. And the shot is saved, but this kind of remember this kind of movement while him on the ball, him on the move, having that really good first touch where he's able to get past the defender and then get a shot away. That shows up in the second half. And then, with Sheffield, they did have that injury to Chris Bash, and it's a horrible leg injury. And to be fair, it is probably hard for them to see one of their teammates having an injury like that, being able to kind of pick yourselves back up. Uh, it was 0-0 at halftime. It is worth saying that. But Fulham were starting to get some chances. So here's one for Pereira. And again, William is free on the wing, and this time on the right side. And he sends in a very good ball into the box. Ball bounces to Pereira, and he blasts it over the bar. I feel like this is kind of similar to what Decore had. The ball bounces, and Pereira just kind of sent it over. Decore was able to. No, Decore is probably closer to the goal. But yeah, if Pereira gets this a little bit better, if he gets his knee over the ball, this is probably the first goal. But it doesn't matter because they score a little bit after that. This is a very well worked goal. It's a quick passing triangle between Robinson, William, Paulinho. Paulinho then plays a pass to Vinicius, and then who's in the middle of the field, and then he's holding off a defender. He collects it and then plays the ball to Pereira, making a run on the wing, and then Pereira sends a wonderful early cross to meet Bobby Reed, who's made a run behind the Fulham back line or the Sheffield back line, where Reed finishes it. And then there was a chance for Sheffield there for Cam Archer. It's one maybe decent moment of quality where Archer does well to beat D up, and then he gets by him and he sends in a hard ball across the goal that McBurnley just misses getting a touch. But it doesn't matter because Sheffield do get back into the game. It's unlucky for Fulham though, because this goal happened. Diop has the ball. Nothing's really happening here, and he feels his hamstring go, and basically has to stop playing. And then that leads, Sheffield's able to counter, and then from there, Larishi just sends a hopeful cross into the penalty area, and it deflects off Anthony Robinson for their own goal. So that was a little unfortunate. I don't really feel like that necessarily Robinson's fault. Not to say I'm US bias or anything. And then it doesn't really matter because Fulham get the second with Carney, and this is a unreal. I don't know if he mends this, but this is a very good shot. Carney is 30 yards out, and he slips when he hits this, and it's just the perfect looping ball that spins off the back of the top of the crossbar. And because of the keeper, fighting him diving, it because of the way he dove after it bounced off the crossbar, it like bounced off the keeper. So it's a Fottingham own goal. This didn't really feel that deserved, and then William was able to get the third game. basically over at this point. But this made it official, and it's a good. Again, William jumps on a loose ball into the box, has a very good first touch, and then goes to go past the defender, and then fires the shot hard and low to beat Fotheringham. Now, the game wasn't really that close because of the chances that Fulham had. Fulham had 20 chances, six on target, three big chances for Fulham. But that said, you look at the goal. The goal that kind of changed everything was that second goal. That and that was incredible luck. But at the same time, they were the only reason that Sheffield scored was because of the Diop thing. So Sheffield were not really in the game, to be honest. I mean, possession. Fulham having the majority of it. Sheffield only 237 passes, 69%. You're starting to see that kind of pattern with a lot of these teams that are losing games. They just don't have the ball at all. Five shots and two on target. I mean, this game is about William. I mean, Fulham and about William. I don't know how he's able to do this because he's quick. He's still got his pace. He was the best player on the pitch here, and I liked seeing Tom Carney and Iwobi come on, and I would like to see them play maybe a little bit more. To be honest, we saw Iwobi come on versus Chelsea last week, and he was played more of an advanced role than in midfield. And we saw Tom Carney come on versus Chelsea, so I liked it. I mean, the only negative is Diop is injured now. You imagine he's not going to be able to pick things up. He hasn't really had the best go of it, to be honest. So there is Calvin Bassey. Can Calvin Bassey and Tim Ream have a little partnership together, or I don't necessarily know how long Tosin's going to be out. But I feel like when they get Tosin back, he'll probably be playing over Diop anyways. But that could maybe be something they have to deal with. Damatrari is also out injured. Maybe when you get him back, you can maybe see him on the wing. But for the most part, I liked what Fulham offered. I like seeing Vinicius getting a start. I don't necessarily know if Vinicius or even William Jimenez will work out, but I feel like Vinicius maybe offers just a little bit more energy. They also have a striker named Rodrigo Munez, who's gotten a couple late minute cameos. He's a 22-year-old 6 foot striker from Brazil. He played last year and only scored 2 goals from Middlesbrough, but he's got a good body. So we maybe could see if they don't work out, maybe we maybe could see him. I mean, they're obviously missing. They're missing Mitrovic. That's kind of been a theme for them the entire time. But what they're not missing is they're not missing Paulinho anymore. He might be enough to honestly keep them up. They're quietly a top 9 side passing the ball, and they're quietly good at winning the ball back. And again, I kind of discounted them earlier in the year, and I keep doing that. And maybe I should stop. I should be a believer in Marco Silva, maybe more than I am. And he's doing an underrated job. Just he's 'cause at a glance, you look at the squad and they don't. It doesn't feel like they should be as competitive as they are. And to be honest, with Paulinho back in, um, they're not conceding the chances that they were in the beginning of the season. I kind of feel like Fulham might be okay now. Might be okay comfortably. So we'll have to see. Sheffield, I don't feel that. They're struggling, and I mentioned that it might be Iriola that goes. It could be the Sheffield coach because I know he was under pressure. He was under pressure, and then they lost 8-0 to Newcastle. And we'll see what they have to figure out something else because what they're doing is not working. They can't score and they can't defend. So that's not usually a good combination. And then I'll move on to Aston Villa and Wolves. This one ended 1-1. And this was it took a while to get going, but in the second half this was good. So how is Aston Villa going to respond to their 6-1 hammering of Brighton, and how are Wolves going to follow up their win over Man City? So you could have imagined both having a little hangover from what happened last week, and maybe that did show because there weren't a whole lot of chances in the first half. They're probably the only one that came for Villa's way was Cash, and it happened in the 7th minute, so it was early. Douglas Luiz has a really good job to keep his balance being shoved off the ball. He finds Mose Diaby and then plays it to John McGinn, and McGinn again sends a terrific delivery into the back post. Cash meets it, and it forces a decent save by Jose Sa. John McGinn keeps showing up, and I need to remember that he's not the stereotype that of a kind of player that I had in my head, at least under Emery. Maybe he was under Steven Gerrard or under other managers, because this guy's starting to legit. He's quite good on the ball. He's got really good delivery on him. Now, I used to think he was just kind of hit and hope. Maybe he'd be a liability in possession. No. And I watched the Scotland and Spain game yesterday. McGinn was fantastic in possession as well for Spain, and he was really good at winning the ball back. He's turned into a better player, and I can only credit I can credit him for working on his craft, but I can also credit Unai Emery. I think there's some kind of coaching that's happening behind the scenes because I don't feel like he was this kind of player a couple of years ago. Anyways, and then there's a chance for have a chance for Wolves with Ait Nouri is like the only really chance that they had an attack. Wang Lei Chen sends a decent ball into the area, and Ait Nouri gets contact, but just slices it wide. But both teams were poor in possession, and both teams were poor in transition. Only so Villa had 8 shots, but only one on target. Wolves had 3 shots and 0 on target, and both teams kind of lined up the same way, and both playing back threes. So maybe you figured it was going to be kind of a cagey game, and it opened up in the second half. So the 47th minute, it's Watkins, and it's another great ball by John McGinn. He picks out Watkins in the box, and Watkins does well to get contact here, and he just can't keep the effort low enough to trouble Jose Sa, but it's close. And then we get to the goal, and the first goal scored by Wang for Wolves, and Wang picks the ball off Douglas Luiz. Wolves then go from defense to attack immediately and play it to Cunha, who immediately plays it out to Pedro Neto out wide. And from there, just kind of like last week, Neto gets on his bike or moped or beeps past Pau Torres, and he gets to the byline and sends a danger cross into the 6 yard area where Wang is there to get the touch into the net. And I mean, the problem is Douglas Luiz losing the ball on the sideline. That's where your protection's kind of supposed to be in front of the back line. So from there, Villa kind of lose their numbers, lose their shape. And Luca Digne starts off kind of out of possession, and so or out of position because you're not really expecting someone like Douglas Luiz to lose the ball. So that's kind of the problem when you have what happens when you have your fullbacks playing higher up in the attack. If you lose the ball, your back line can be got at. And here, yeah, you don't really fancy Pedro and Pau Torres versus Pedro Neto in any kind of open play kind of sprint. And yeah, it ended up kind of being what you would expect. It kind of worked out against them. But it doesn't matter because Pau Torres gets his turn to laugh. It's a near immediate response. So Watkins gets the ball and floats something towards the back post that Pau Torres brings home, and it's good for him to redeem himself a little bit here. But it's a brilliant ball sent in by Watkins. It's a left foot curler away, curling towards Torres, and he's able to just get a good flick on it. And then the first yellow came to Mario Lamina. It's worth kind of remembering that. And then that happens. He ends up kind of getting sent off. Um, it doesn't happen till like later on, so it doesn't really matter. But there wasn't a whole lot after that that came after that. I mean, there was a chance for maybe for Veneto. Actually, this is a big chance. So we're starting to see Villa's high line maybe exposed here. So Wolves get the ball. Wolves. Kolasinac gets it. Wolves time the run on time. I guess maybe that's what I was trying to say. So Kolasinac gets it and then picks out Pedro Neto, making a run into the box, and Neto sends the ball over the bar. If he flicks this and he gets the power right, this is the second goal. This probably wins the game. And then Watkins had a chance to really win it. So in the 90th minute, Watkins has the ball in the box and he gets nudged over by Matt Doughty. This is deemed okay. I think he. It's weird because I feel like this should have been a PK, but at the same time, earlier in the game, Neto got shoved over as well, and to me, both cancel each other out. But I don't feel like that's the way things are refed. So Watkins probably should have had a PK here. Neto maybe should have earlier in the game as well, and then Mario Lemina gets a second yellow card in the late in the game, and then in the 98th minute, there's a giant chance where Kanza nearly wins it, and he finds his way into the box, and there's a cross that finds him, and he gets good power on the shot, and it strikes a body. This, I think, this is just unfortunate. I think if it doesn't hit the body, I actually think it's going in. And I low key think it's time for him to be considered for an England call up. To be honest, Kanza is playing quite well. Because you look at Villa's back line, they're missing Tyron Mings. I mentioned that yesterday, and I was wondering, well, when are they finally going to be kind of got at defensively? Kansa has been amazing, but both in possession and defensively. And then Watkins nearly won it at the end with a very good header. He struck the post. But a draw did kind of feel fitting. It was very poor first half, very lively in the second half. Lots of chances came in the second half. Aston Villa with 18 shots, 4 on target, 4 big chances for Villa, 3 big chances for Wolves. So I mean, Wolves only had 8 shots, but 3 big chances of those shots. Wolves only 283 possession. Aston Villa 330 passes completed with 84% possession. And with Villa, Watkins nearly wins it. He had a wonderful assist for the goal as well. And I just feel like Watkins is becoming a complete player. And I mentioned McGinn's kind of growth. Watkins is really growing. Playing with someone like Unai Emery, and he's got Villa in 5th place in the table. And again, I felt like if Villa were like, 8th, 7th, 6th, I would have been like, I can see that. But 5th, they're not really far away actually from Champions League spot, points wise. Now again, it's only October, but again, after they got thumped by Newcastle for their first game in the season, giving up 5 goals. It could have been a lot more. I didn't feel like Liverpool struggled against them. I thought their high line was finally going to get them. I thought they looked quite poor versus Chelsea, even though they won that game. And I you just they're very well drilled, and I should probably believe in Emery a little bit more than maybe I do, and that they have a very front and talented front two with Watkins and Diaby, and they are able to kind of play narrow because you're kind of getting some of that width from the two fullbacks that always bomb forward and Cash and Digna, and sometimes they're able to kind of get away with that. Constant can go out wide. Kamara can sometimes be almost like a third center back with his kind of positioning. And their way to kind of they have a way to be able to kind of manipulate different kind of positions to where they can play Cash really high up, where they're not necessarily defensively vulnerable. We've seen that in a couple games, and I do wonder like how much better they could have been with a Tyrone Ming still and with an Emin Buendia. But they're still flying. And then with Wolves, Neto and Wang continue to deliver for them, and Wang two games in a row. Wang, I think, is their leading goal scorer with 6, and that is good because they struggled to score last year, and I think they're still kind of struggling a little bit for chances, but it's good. It's interesting that the chances are coming to Neto and Wang, not necessarily Cunha. But Gary O'Neill has Wolves in a decent spot, and the break ends. They get Bournemouth. Coming. I think they go away to Bournemouth. If they have a real chance to kind of stake a claim that they are going to be a team that'll be safe, and it'll be Bournemouth that'll actually be the team hurting. And if that's the case, Gary O'Neill will certainly enjoy that. If that is the case, and then with Crystal Palace and Nottingham. Nothing happened in this game, so I don't necessarily have to talk about it a lot. Maybe the best moments came from center backs kind of dribbling. Yeah, Crystal Palace with point 0.8 xG. Forest did have 0 for 1. Forest did have the majority of chances, 16-5, 2 big chances apiece. But Crystal Palace, no Eze was playing, no Decore, and maybe the one thing you could say is their keeper was good. Sam Johnson, he had a couple really good 50-50s. Brave going after the ball, made a couple good saves. And we saw Chris Richards actually come on and play central defensive. Central defensive midfielder. So he wasn't just playing in the back line. He wasn't just playing as a center back. He was playing in midfield. So that was. I don't think he was that bad. So that was good to see. Little different. I mean, the note I had for Palace is I feel it's a team you can pencil in. I think for 16th, 13th, and 16th. Not pin, but pencil. But Hodgson has his managed to just keep this team up. I feel like that'll probably be the case as well. They don't have enough to I think actually press for like a top 10 kind of a finish. They are getting close to getting Elise back. I think they'll benefit by getting Jefferson and Lerma back. Um, but and no Eze in this game, but Palace are rough. In this especially in this game, they relying on 18-year-old Rek Sakri. Maybe the benefit is by this time in February, it'll be 19-year-old Raksaki that's a veteran. Maybe we could kind of see that because I've read a lot about him, where a lot of former players that have seen him train think he's going to be a star. And Palace have a way of turning out these kind of players into stars. You can think of Olise, you can think of Eze, you can think of Zaha even before him. So that could be a name to maybe follow, but he didn't have the best game here. He did get a start, and it wasn't necessarily that great. And with Nottingham Forest, Murillo played well. That the defender that has come in. I think Dominguez looks good for them. And Gibbs White, I guess, is a player that always kind of he's the one guy that actually seems to have some freedom to express himself. It maybe Elanga if Cooper could play him more. I do think they're missing Awani. It's worth kind of saying that, but I generally do not necessarily love watching this team or talking about them. It seems it almost seems like a chore to me, but they have enough quality, I think, to stay up as well. So that's probably a team that you could maybe pencil in as being safe. Pencil, not necessarily pen. But that's it. The U.S. The EPL is on a break, and the U.S. has Germany and Ghana. It's a pretty big week for us. So I'm looking forward to this. We get to see Nagelsmann Germany, and we get to see and Germany has struggled for the last like 5 games. So they got thumped by Japan, but they also their last game they beat France. They turned around and Thomas Hansi Flick was not necessarily working, and maybe Nagelsmann will have them playing a little bit better. They'll probably have Musiala back. They've been missing him for some of those games, and I, I don't really know what to necessarily expect with Germany. But for the U.S., I do like the roster that we've gone with. Gio might be back; he's expected to feature. No Anthony Robinson, so maybe we'll see Lund, who played in that Uzbekistan window in September. I even think Oman. I think it was Oman. We might see Lind and Scally, maybe used, maybe with Des. So we might have a chance to see who maybe build some depth at least for that left back spot because it feels like Anthony Robinson's going to have that locked down. There is a midfielder that is playing in Germany, Leonard Maloney. I have no idea what he's about, but he's been picked. So maybe we'll see him get some minutes. I'd like to maybe see that. Uh, he's a defensive midfielder, and we without Tyler Adams, I don't. You imagine it's going to be Weston and Musa, kind of just the 2 kind of penciled in for that midfield, and there'll be someone else, for that 3rd. But I don't necessarily know if we can kind of go in thinking that we're going to have Tyler Adams next summer. He's struggling a little bit, and I don't like how, he had a hamstring issue, last March, and then he wasn't able to go. He got a game, uh for Bournemouth in kind of a cup game. He got some minutes, and then after that, he needed surgery again, and he's going to be out for a couple months after that. So I'm starting to actually be a little bit worried about his body breaking down. So, and that is an issue because people maybe don't necessarily think he's all that great. To me, he makes that midfield tick. He doesn't lose the ball, and he's really good at doing that. That when you play with a 4-3-3, that's sometimes especially when you play with fullbacks that go high up the way Berhalter likes doing, you need to not lose the ball in midfield, and he pretty much does that to me. So yeah, those are the things that I'll be looking at, and I'm at least we have something to to look forward to on the weekend, and finally for this international break, Oman and Uzbekistan, you don't really imagine is necessarily the best for competition, though. Uzbekistan did offer us something to think about. It's worth saying that. But Ghana and Germany, absolutely. Finally, give us some real competition to see what we've got. Let's see what Berhalter has to do if he's under some pressure. And it is also big because we don't really have a whole lot of games to really get ourselves to test ourselves before the summer when we have Copa. So this is a big window. This is the big one. Also, Gio Reyna's back. Is Berhalter going to play him? Is he going to play him in the number 10? And is Gio going to play and play well because he isn't playing for Dortmund? So there are a lot of things. Those are kind of the headlines going into this week. I'll be doing a show to talk about them after we return, and then it'll be back to EPL review. So thank you for listening. And one thing I do want to say is, you can catch us on YouTube, obviously this channel. Also, we have a podcast on Spotify. If you want to kind of check that out during, maybe you're in the car, you don't necessarily want to stream internet video. You can maybe play the podcast. So we are Reserve Squad Midweek on Spotify. It's worth kind of saying that as well. And that'll be it. So for that said, you stay squatting and stop recording.